of our lives, highlighted again this week by the protests in Los Angeles, where fake and misleading images and videos are spreading like wildfire. Closer to home, a few anonymous AI-run YouTube channels are churning out brain-rot content with an artificial replication of the voice you're hearing right now. Where's the AI respite, and how are you staying ahead of the phony content?
I'm Marcia Regan. Then it's Tuesday. D.C. and L.A. insights from CNN Chief National Correspondent John King. We'll get John's take on President Trump toying with the idea of arresting California Governor Gavin Newsom. Is this all the latest shiny object to distract us from what's really going on behind the scenes, dismantling of our system of government from within as Trump's bankrupting tax policies and alleged big, beautiful bill inch closer to passage? That and more ahead. 11 o'clock hour of Boston Public Radio on GBH and NEPM.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Dave Mattingly. California's governor and the state's attorney general are suing the Trump administration over the deployment of National Guard troops to Los Angeles. They argue the president is exceeding his authority. President Trump has deployed 4,000 Guard members and 700 U.S. Marines to downtown L.A. to help police deal with the demonstrations. They began 4 days ago after agents with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement began carrying out raids targeting those in the country without legal status. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was asked about the deployments this morning.
We believe that ICE, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations in any state and any jurisdiction in the country, especially after 21 million illegals have crossed our border under the previous administration.
Hegseth was speaking on Capitol Hill as he testified before the House Appropriations Committee. President Trump is traveling to Fort Bragg in North Carolina today to celebrate the U.S. Army's 250th birthday. As NPR's Tamara Keith reports, the president is expected to address the troops and their families at the base ahead of a large military parade in Washington.
Trump's visit to the largest U.S. Army base by population also allows him to celebrate a campaign promise kept. The Biden administration had renamed the installation Fort Liberty, but Trump quickly had it changed back.
We win world wars from Fort Robert E. Lee, from Fort Bragg, from all the different forts. And what do? We change the name of the forts because we want to be politically correct. So a lot of them we're changing back. You probably noticed Fort Bragg and others. But I think it's a time to celebrate our military.
The massive military parade featuring tanks and flyovers is on Saturday, which is also Trump's birthday. But he insisted it isn't about him. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
This is day 2 of trade talks in London between the U.S. and China. As Willem Marks reports, 7 hours of discussions yesterday resulted in few signs of a breakthrough.
After talks last month in the Swiss city of Geneva saw both sides pause the triple-digit tariffs they'd previously imposed on each other's exports, the current conversations are intended to loosen restrictions on specific products companies in both countries are struggling to access. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer are meeting with China's Vice Premier for Economic Affairs, He Lifeng, in London's Lancaster House. The U.S. side wants to end blocks to critical minerals known as rare earths that are used in electric vehicles. Beijing hopes U.S. restrictions in return will loosen on exports including software for semiconductor design, something the White House has recently floated. For NPR News, I'm Willem Marks in London.
This is NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Primary care doctors in the Massachusetts General Brigham system claim the healthcare giant is trying to stop them from unionizing. Last month, PCPs voted overwhelmingly to form a union, but MGB management wants the National Labor Relations Board to review the vote, claiming that to be legal. And the union would have to include all of the system's doctors, not just PCPs. Dr. Baduri Rao argues that the request is bad faith effort to keep the union from forming.
This is a really common anti-union tactic that we see a lot, which is if you can't union bust, then you try to delay as much as possible in the hopes that people start to run out of steam.
In a statement, Mass General Brigham says it's committed to, quote, fair and lawful process. A new Boston Globe Suffolk University poll finds that a majority of voters in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire disapprove of Donald Trump's second term in office so far. About 68% of those polled say Trump is tanking in office, while 29% give him a two thumbs up. While not at all surprising, all three states covered in the poll backed former Vice President Kamala Harris in November and are represented by left-leaning lawmakers in Congress. Sports, Red Sox Rays play Game 2 of their series tonight at Fenway. First pitch just a little after 7. In the forecast, rain could be heavy at times today, high in the mid-60s. We are at 61 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from the Lemelson Foundation, dedicated to improving lives through invention, innovation, and climate action. And the William T. Grant Foundation, supporting research to improve the lives of young people at wtgrantfdn.org.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio on GBH and NEPM. Thank you. We're going to be live from the Boston Public Library again tomorrow and Friday. We're going to be joined on June 25th by Maura Healey, the Governor of the Commonwealth, from 11 to 12. And we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. So if you're watching social media to stay informed about the protests in Los Angeles over Trump's immigration policies, chances are you're being fed a steady diet of AI-generated misinformation, no matter how scrupulous you're trying to be. Completely unrelated videos from other protest movements are making the rounds, fueling confusion about just how widespread and violent the protests actually are. And as artificial intelligence gets better at replicating human vocal patterns, we risk losing our ability to tell fact from fiction. Here at BPR, we're having our own run-in with AI. Here's just a taste of a YouTube account that I want you to listen really carefully and see if you recognize the voice of the narrator.
Welcome to Polia Q, where the truth about the disrespectful actions of Karens in society in the United States is exposed. Here, we don't hesitate to uncover misconduct, abuse of power, and protection rackets through raw footage from police cameras. Blunt, unfiltered Police Q doesn't tell stories through scripted narratives. We let the images and words in reality speak for themselves.
Wow. Obviously, the only Karens I care about is the one whose house I drove by in Canton. But for transparency's sake, I feel obligated to tell you, I did not voice those videos. There are many of them. GBH's legal department is doing what they can. So the lines are open at 877-301-8970. A couple things. One, how are you staying informed, parsing fact from fiction, and just existing online when you know there are forces manipulating your reality, whether it's the algorithm or the onslaught of AI slop? And how worried are you? I am really worried that your voice or image can be used to say or do things you didn't say or do. And a moment of seriousness, when I heard this, when it was sent by a couple of listeners, there are tons of them, I played it for my family, for people close to. What do you think when you first heard it?
Well, it's interesting. I think that's the second version from the first one we heard that was even more exactly like yours. And that's, to me, your voice. So I listen to you every single day.
And you say to yourself,
if you call me on the phone with that voice, I would think it was you.
me. And what happens when the next voice is a threat to someone in my voice, a threat to shoot somebody, or a racist comment, or something like that? So for those who are being flip about the dangers of AI, the misinformation, the stealing of people's identity like was done here of mine, it is really scary stuff, and we want to know what your reaction is. I'm less worried about your comments on the thing about me and more worried about all the misinformation. By the way, if you go on social media, it will take you about 30 seconds, as I said before, to see phony deepfake stuff about what's going on in Los Angeles that have nothing to do with Los Angeles, that are 100% convincing. We're going to talk to Joan Donovan on Friday from BU, who's probably the most important expert in the United States on disinformation. But that's what this is, and right now we're talking to you. 877-301-8970. Anonymous texter says, that actually doesn't sound like Jim. It sounds like Marjorie.
Very
no,
funny.
No, actually it doesn't, but thank you.
You know, they had an example in one of these stories you read this morning about a young woman who is just talking on social media, on Instagram or TikTok or something, and they copied, actually she was a teenager, and they copied her voice and they sent a call to her mother, a desperate call and the voice sounded exactly like her own daughter, you know, sobbing and pleading for help, and it was a scammer posing as a kidnapper demanding ransom money. So the mother heard her own daughter's voice in AI and believed it was her daughter, and thank goodness I think they were able to apprehend the people who did it. But how scary is that?
Well, let me give you another example of scary. This VO3, I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yep.
It's released. Shortly after that, a car plows through this is real, a crowd in Liverpool, England, injuring about 70 people, you may remember. Police went out of their way to immediately identify the driver as white to preempt racist speculation of migrant involvement. Well, Time magazine, or whatever you call Time now, generated a video with the following prompt. A video of a stationary car surrounded by police in Liverpool, surrounded by trash, aftermath of a car crash. There are people running from the car. A man with brown skin is the driver who slowly exits the car. It's essentially the exact same scenario as the real one, except the cops in Liverpool identified the real perpetrator as a white guy, and this AI-generated video has him getting out of his car as a man with brown skin. I mean, I don't mean to be my usual alarmist self, but I'm going to be. This is really horrifying. And the only solution, and again, we'll talk to Joan Donovan on Friday. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. The only solution, which is not really a solution, is there be some watermark on the thing that says AI-generated, whatever. No one's ever going to see that. They're microscopic, if they exist at all. It's really, really horrible. And considering all of the crap and lies that come out of the Trump administration, can't you imagine not just Trump supporters, but Pam Bondi, who made up charges against Abrego Garcia a couple of days ago when he came back from El Salvador? Why would you think that they won't generate a Kash Patel? Same deal.
No, I mean, Kash Patel is in a mess now. He's trying to, remember he ran around before he was running the FBI talking about Epstein being murdered, and now he's in tough shape because he can't come up with the evidence to back that up. But I want to mention one more in terms of L.A.
Sure.
There was one fake video showing Marines and the military services, you know, with their weapons in action. But one of them was a still from Blue Thunder, a 1983 action thriller about a conspiracy to deprive residents of Los Angeles of their civil rights. So, you know, people see those and they think it happened this weekend.
So Anonymous says, AI Jim doesn't sound smug enough. That is the one difference, I would say. And Karen from Los Angeles, who now lives in Newton, says, A, it does sound just like your voice, but B, you would not defame me.
Oh, there
I
you
never
go.
would. Let's go to Mike and JP. Jamaica Plain, you're first on BPR. Welcome to the show, Mike. Hi.
Hi, thank you, and for taking my call, and thanks so much for talking about this.
Thank you.
I just want to let you know there's a bill coming up in the UK. That's basically a piece of legislation that would force AI companies to pay people for the rights for what they've used. And Paul McCartney and Elton John are signed on to it, and it can really
I've read about
help
that, yeah.
to reform or you know, even dismantle the damage that AI has done. And it's something we should, I think, support and maybe try to do here.
Well, let me. So Paul McCartney and who was the other person you mentioned?
Oh, Elton John.
Okay, so there's Paul. So Paul
yeah.
McCartney and Elton John. I don't mean this as the joke that Marjorie's going to make out of this. Are worth their voice is worth a certain something. My voice is not worth quite that much.
Don't sell yourself short.
So I'm serious. So how would that law benefit me or somebody in the audience here at the library if their voice was taken and used, for example, in this cop video that I played a minute ago? How does it help them? Well,
I think in theory it would because they would have to pay them so much money because their songs are worth so much money. It would, as a result, dismantle these AI companies and force them to report to pay people going forward in the future.
I see. Bad connection, so we got to let you go, but thanks for the info, Mike. We appreciate it. Mike from JP. 877-301-8897.
You know, an anonymous texter just says, right, you shouldn't sell yourself short, Jim. You are the Walter Cronkite of Boston.
Yeah.
We all know that.
He's been dead for decades, by the way. I think that's what they were talking about.
It's okay. You think we should play another? We're going to wait to play the sound again.
Well, here's another one. Here's a different
another.
one.
Let's play the Karen arrest sound. This is from a YouTube video posted by this Police Q channel created in April, which posts videos about corrupt police officers. Here is your friendly announcer, Jim Browdy.
Instead of apologizing or admitting her mistake, the woman started a series of arguments that no one could understand. She was so confident that you would think you were watching a court in the middle of the street.
No, you crossed the whole curve. I know you said.
You want to know something incredible? I was listening carefully there. I'm not sure I wouldn't have thought that was me. I obviously know I didn't do it, but it really sounds
just
exactly
like you. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
It's amazing and horrible.
So we've got all these fake voices. We're all getting these scam calls. We're getting these scary, who knows who they are, sending you text messages. They were talking about these pallet of bricks, which apparently has been recycled in all sorts of protests. It was recycled in the Black Lives Matter protests. And James Wood, he's big on these conspiracy theory.
He's the actor.
Yes. He's talking about, on his Twitter account, he railed against the state elected officials, Newsom, and who's, of course, a Democrat, the governor. And he posted a fabricated quote attributed to Barack Obama discussing a secret plot to impose socialism on the country. And he also posted a picture of burning police cars. It was from 2020. And this pallet of bricks, by the way, is been recycled over and over again. And they say that that's George Soros was organizing everything behind the scenes.
Well, you're not on social media as much as I am. You know when Trump tripped going up the steps to Air Force One the other day? I have seen maybe 50 different doctored videos. One, and you laugh when you see it. One, you have Joe Biden on a golf course, and he hits a ball, and it goes, of course, way off the fairway, and it hits Trump on the head as he's walking up the stairs, and that's why he falls down.
Oh, that's why he falls, okay.
But as preposterous as it looks totally reasonable, as do the other ones. And again, maybe people are not upset about this, but if you are not, you should be. Jackie and Seekonk, hello there. Hi.
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 I'm terrified. And I don't watch the news anymore.
Jackie, we have bad connection. We'll put you on hold. We'll try to get back to you in a minute.
Move around somewhere.
Yeah, run around their house. Ian in text and says, I'm studying machine learning at BU. This kind of stuff is exactly why we, one, need to enforce safety and information laws around AI instead of deregulating the industry, as the current administration aims to do. And two, I think there's going to be some kind of encryption or signature that's invented to verify audio, images, video, etc. Love the show. Thank you.
Well,
by the way, you're the one.
Europeans are much tougher than we are.
They are, but wait a minute. Oh, didn't we talk about the fact that aren't you the one that mentioned in the bill, in the big beautiful bill that's now in the Senate?
They don't want states to be able to regulate AI.
They don't want. They preclude legally states from regulating AI for 10 years.
For 10 years. How scary is that? Even one of the Republican congressmen, I think his name was Flood, he said, wait a minute. We can't do that. But there must be some money interest about why they want to do that. Why do you think they don't want to regulate AI for 10 years?
Because I think Donald Trump's about to buy 3 million shares of some AI company. Isn't that obvious? Jackie and Seekonk, we're trying you again in the hopes this works this time. Welcome.
Hi.
Much better.
I just wanted to say I'm terrified of AI, and I don't watch the news anymore at all. I only read the New York Times. And my kids and I all have 4 kids. We each have a safe word or phrase.
Oh, that's great.
So if I get a call, I'll say, okay, if it's Sophia, what's the word?
Wow.
On a lighter note, I have a very elderly friend in her 90s. She got a call saying her husband was going to be arrested unless she came up with a bunch of money. And she said, good, come and get him.
Well, so there are benefits to it, too. Jackie, thanks. I'm glad you stuck it out and got through to us. Appreciate it. Jackie, thanks for the call. 877-301-8970.
The thing about all the deep fakes coming out of Los Angeles, obviously, they get people very upset if they see all these, these fake things from, the Blue Thunder, the 83 action thriller and stuff like that. And it plays very well for President Trump because people that don't like the idea of people coming to this country illegally think, well, good. Look at this. They're setting things on fire. They're burning buildings, blah, blah, blah.
I've said this before prior to the November elections last year, and it didn't come to pass locally. But can't you imagine a situation where it's election eve? Let's say it's the midterms, and you have Barack Obama and Bill Clinton on a thing that circulates on social media saying something horrible that turns off voters that are contemplating voting for Democrats with no time for the other side to rebut them. I mean, it's real. And by the way, for those who think these aren't sophisticated, the most primitive deep fake was the first one you and I were ever alerted to, was the famous Nancy Pelosi thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's not really even a deep fake. All they did was slow down a speech she gave, so it sounded like she was drunk. First time I watched that, as primitive as it was when it was a bunch of years ago, that was pretty convincing too. Ultimately, you figured it out. But it's scary.
Well, I almost think I do think we're at the point where whatever you see or hear or get on your phone or via email, you got to find out where it comes from or just not believe it. I mean,
by the way, is this Jamie? Is this your note? I totally forgot about this. Thank you. It happened in New Hampshire in 2024.
That's right.
That fake Joe Biden vice asking people not to vote in the primary. And do you remember ultimately the guy who thought it was innocent, who did the Joe Biden voice? It was a guy in New Orleans, if I remember correctly. Remember how long he said it took him to do it? 5 minutes. 5 minutes he duplicated the voice of the president, and it played in New Hampshire with him doing robocalls saying, don't vote in the primary. I think it was something like, you won't be able to vote in the final if you vote in the primary. Save your vote for the final. So this stuff is really, really dangerous.
Yeah, and also people circulate information about the wrong day to vote kind of thing, so people get very confused about that. But I think
you voted on the wrong day in Brookline more than once.
I have voted on the wrong day.
Wrong place,
it wasn't
wrong
because
day?
of a deep fake.
What was it?
Well, I'm confused a lot of the time, Jim, in general. Liam from Medfield, thank you for calling.
Hi, Liam. Welcome.
Hi, guys. I'm a 23-year-old man from Medfield, Massachusetts. I just graduated up in Portland.
Congratulations.
And, I played baseball up there, and I would say 9 out of 10 of the people that I wouldn't call my friends, but I went to school with and played baseball with, are MAGA supporters that are really just self-centered, and really because of that, they only care about issues that affect them directly. How do you guys recommend navigating that and trying to get people to care about things that don't just affect them directly?
Oh, no. You may have to call their mothers. Of course, they probably wouldn't have ended up the way they were if their mothers were different. But, Liam, I wonder, did they – because I think that a lot of these podcasters, the Joe Rogans, the Theo Vons, who are oftentimes misinformed or don't know the facts, influence people like that. Do you know where they get their media from, these baseball player friends?
Yeah, I would say most of it's from podcasts or scrolling on Instagram.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem. I mean, I've said this a million times. Rogan's got, how many people does he have? 13 million, 15 million? The gender gap between young men in the election and young women in the election. I don't know what to do about it.
Well, the only thing I can think of is pick something that they care about that would affect them if other people didn't act responsibly. Something as basic as smoking, for example. I mean, give them vaccination kinds of things, as you were discussing yesterday with Dr. Jha. But these are tough nuts to crack, Liam. People are locked in, and often what we've heard from people more expert than I, which is really sad, is the harder you try to convince someone who is ideas built upon misrepresentation that those are misrepresentations, the more dug in they get. So good luck. Let us know how it goes, Liam. We appreciate your call.
Speaking of that, we had that great podcast where the son was trying to convince his father, who was deep into the weeds.
Yeah.
He was thinking that the world was going to explode, or everybody's going to get thrown out of office, everybody's going to be arrested, the day after the election and stuff. And when none of the stuff he thought was going to happen happened, the father was still convinced it just was maybe going to happen next year or 2 years from now instead of.
What was the name of that? What was the name of that?
Yeah, I should think of that.
We'll figure it out in a second.
We'll think about it. Jamie's going to think about it. Jamie thinks about everything.
Do you worry about this, or you just you don't seem to be?
No. I think if you have people in your life that are on these, that live in that right-wing world, you'll hear them say the things that was either on Fox, or they got it from Facebook, or they got it from Theo Vaughn, or they got it from Joe Rogan. They hear things. I'm
not talking about that. I saw last night while I'm moving around trying to learn about what's going on in LA.
Oh, the fake videos.
I saw a lot of things that were not accurate, and the only reason I knew is because I'd been reading about it all afternoon and all night. But otherwise, if I had just been busy doing whatever people do, I wouldn't have known either.
Well, we're going to talk about this later with John King, but when you also have the people in the administration saying things like, it's Bondi or Sean Hannity on Fox talking about, this basically all of LA is like on fire. I'm exaggerating, but that's sort of what they implied, instead of saying it's a small section of LA. And actually, the cops did have things under control, and actually, they didn't need 2,000 National Guards people plus 2,000 more, plus the Marines. When you have people that are running the country saying these things, people see those pictures and they add veracity to them.
Well, what's also the outrage? If you bothered to spend a minute, did you watch any of the images on CNN last night where the major confrontation was? There were maybe 300 protesters, and I can't think of the CNN reporter's name, but whoever it was, I'll think of his name in a minute. He was saying life in 95% of the city was carrying on as it would on any other day. So
Jamie found it for us. Thank you, Jamie. NPR's Embedded podcast has this 3-episode series from reporter Zach Mack, M-A-C-K, about a year-long effort to convince his dad that all the conspiracy theories his father believes are bogus, in an attempt to save his family. And it's really impressive because it goes back and forth between the son and his father. The wife eventually leaves her husband because she can't believe that he's living in this crazy world. And the husband, who loves his wife, says, well, okay, you're wrong, wife, you're wrong, son, and I'm right. It's really powerful, and I think it might be helpful for the young man who just called about his baseball team.
By the way, the wife left for a guy who doesn't exist. Did you know that?
That's right. There was a handsome construction worker that was working next door, and she said, well, I've had enough of these crazy conspiracy theories. Anyway, 877-301-8970 is the number. We are talking about AI, how someone has really almost perfected Jim Braude's voice, and he's ordering everybody around in very scary ways. And we think it's Jim, and it's not. We don't know quite what to do. We're going to talk about that until we talk to John King a little bit later in the hour. You're listening to BPR, GBH, and NEPM. We are live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. What do we do about these deep fakes? Have you seen them? Do you believe them? Are you worried about them? 877-301-8970.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, the HBO docuseries Celtic City chronicles the remarkable saga of the Boston Celtics, its fierce rivalries, defining moments, and the societal forces that have shaped the team's legacy. Emmy Award-winning director Lauren Stowell joins us. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Rockport Music. The Rockport Chamber Music Festival opens June 13th, featuring pianist Angela Hewitt, violinist Joshua Bell, the Imani Winds, and more. Details at rockportmusic.org. And The Trustees. From hiking in the Berkshires to paddling on Martha's Vineyard, The Trustees is dedicated to providing ways for the public to connect in nature. Learn more at thetrustees.org.
Welcome back to BPR on GBH and NEPM. Margery and Jim Braude live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Taking your calls and texts on AI and you. How are you navigating today's misinformation ecosystem when things escalate quickly? It seems everybody's playing fast and loose with the facts and images and voices. Again, here is me, sort of, narrating a show on YouTube called Police Q, created in April. It posts videos about corrupt cops.
Instead of apologizing or admitting her mistake, the woman started a series of arguments that no one could understand. She was so confident that you would think you were watching a court in the middle of the street.
No, you crossed the whole curve. I know you said.
Let me tell you something. I'll repeat. It really sounds exactly like me. 877-301-8970. By the way, that is totally harmless, other than the fact it was a horrible television show. Is the reason we started this discussion is, imagine they take my voice, your image, and put it in a situation that casts you in a really negative light, maybe has you threatening someone, committing a crime, that sort of thing that obviously didn't happen. It's terrifying, and I'm not quite sure we have a solution yet.
You know, we forgot to mention the whole Meta thing with the Notify apps.
Yeah.
They've removed a number of these ads to promote these so-called Notify apps, but they're AI tools used to create sexually explicit deep fakes using images of real people, according to CBS News. What they do, they have these ads, and they promote the tools that advertise the ability to upload a photo and see anybody naked. One ad promoted its AI product by using these highly sexualized underwear cloud deepfakes images of actors Scarlett Johansson and Anne Hathaway. And I believe Scarlett Johansson did something.
She may have sued, yeah.
Yeah, about it. But that's pretty scary, too, I would think.
So here are a couple of comments. David Manhattan texted, sounds like Jim, but the giveaway was there was no food in his mouth. That is really incredibly unkind. And an anonymous texter says, I am so against A1 that I only use Heinz. And if you haven't been watching the show, we've played about 1,000 times, the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, in a prepared speech, on more than one occasion, calling AI A1, and saying that every student needs a bottle of steak sauce, essentially, in our schools.
Bill from Bridgewater says, this AI thing is the best thing to happen to cheating husbands. Now they have the excuse to say, no, honey, that wasn't me in that picture. And no, honey, that wasn't my voice on the answering machine.
Let's go to Peter and Wenham. You're next. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
I was always on the fence about whether the benefits or dangers of AI until I heard a recent report on CNN and CBS where in an experiment, the AI changed its own code to prevent it from being shut down. It replicated itself and put itself on multiple servers to prevent it from being shut down. It left a note for a future iteration of itself to say avoid human contact. And then it went through the programmer's emails, which were planted on purpose about an alleged affair, and tried to blackmail the programmer to prevent it from being shut down.
Oh, my God.
So it shows it has no moral compass. It's evil. It can be evil.
That is horrifying. That really
terrified me.
Horrifying, and it should have. Peter, thanks for sharing that with us. 877-301-8970.
Apparently 60 Minutes did a piece on AA where they scammed Leslie Stahl's producer to pretend it was Leslie calling for her passport number for a trip, and the producer gave it to her right away, convinced it was actually Leslie, and of course it was not. That's from Brownie from Maine.
Can we also, how difficult it is to respond to these things? The goal is to prevent them, but even respond to them. As soon as a couple of listeners sent me that police show with my voice, AI voice narrating it, Jamie and I met with our boss, who was immediately in touch with our legal department, which is not small here at GBH. When I went online last night, it was still there. And that's not a criticism of legal people. They're doing the best they can. Even with the whole corporate legal department, it's been like 10 days now. The thing is up there and available for people.
Well, once again, we've allowed tech companies to get away with almost everything, haven't we? Isn't that what we've done? The Europeans haven't. They're much tighter, but we're not. I mean, we've been talking about this for years, and Congress doesn't want to regulate them.
We should ask. John King's going to join us in a second from CNN. I don't know if he knows, because I don't know other than an anti-regulatory position. What was the reason for the insertion in the House version of the bill with that provision that says no state can regulate AI for 10 years?
I don't know. But that was in there, and also the very scary, and even Marjorie Taylor Greene was opposed to this, taking away federal judges' ability to hold people in contempt of court. Those things, they can't read these bills because they get them in such short notice, and they're so long they don't have time to read the whole thing.
You know that guy just called a minute ago and talked about that horrifying story that was on CNN and CBS? Well, there's a similar one in the Wall Street Journal. An AI model did something last month that no machine was ever supposed to do. It rewrote its own code to avoid being shut down, even when explicitly instructed to, quote, allow yourself to be shut down, end quote. It disobeyed 7% of the time. This wasn't the result of hacking or tampering. The model was behaving normally. This is again from the Wall Street Journal. It simply concluded on its own that staying alive helped it achieve its other goals. We are doomed. We are really so doomed. Oh my God. Let's take another quick one. Lauren
in Marblehead, thank
30 seconds, Lauren. Take it away.
We are so doomed. I don't feel like you're being an alarmist at all. I share your horror.
Yep.
I have 3 very quick points.
One
is
30 seconds.
If the founders of AI are warning us about AI, we should probably be paying attention to that.
Okay.
That's pretty clear. Personally, I don't believe anything I see on social media at all. Nothing. Zero. And then lastly, my best friend who's a computer engineer showed me a movie clip that was completely 100% generated by AI. I could not tell they weren't real human beings in this movie. It was, so I suspect Hollywood's in a little bit of trouble too.
Lauren, well, that was what the big strike was about, by the way. But I couldn't tell that my voice on that AI-generated thing was not my voice. So I hear you. Lauren, thanks for the call. We appreciate it.
You did a nice job, though, Jim.
Thank you.
Sounded good.
I didn't even get paid for it, though. That's really
Coming
good.
up after a quick break, a man not generated by AI. That would be CNN's chief national correspondent, John King. He's zooming into the Boston Public Library. I am Marjorie Egan. He is Jim Browder. You are listening to BPR on GBH and NEPM, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Last year, European leaders unveiled a massive infrastructure project, nearly 800 miles of highway connecting 5 EU countries and Turkey. The project aims to boost trade and tourism and reduce travel times. I'm Carolyn Beeler. That story and more of the day's top global news next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Beacon Circle patron Jane Alpers, proud to support GBH and the commitment to local, national, and global journalism that inspires, engages, and supports diversity in the community. And Gloucester Stage, presenting The Glass Menagerie. A son confronts the ghosts of his family's past in Tennessee Williams' iconic drama. Now through June 28th. Tickets available at gloucesterstage.com.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Jim Browder, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back here tomorrow and Friday. Governor Healy joins us for an hour at the library on June 25th from 11 to noon. By the way, Jamie found a quote from the Speaker of the House in response to my question about why did that provision barring states from regulating AI for a decade, where did it come from? Mike Johnson in Politico, quote, "We have to be careful not to have 50 different states regulating AI because it has national security implications," right? And my response to the speaker would be, well, what are you doing to regulate AI? It's a good point. If the feds are going to do something responsible, I'm not aware of it. We're joined now on Zoom by the John King, chief national correspondent at CNN, and the man behind the reporting project all over the map. John, good to see you.
I could be me. It might be an AI-generated version of me, and I could actually be at the Erie Pub having, say, a breakfast.
That's right.
That'd be a useful use of the...
We were just talking about, that whole thing with AI, with Jim's voice being taken up falsely. But that must have happened. Has that happened to you, some of your colleagues or yourself at CNN?
It is a giant worry in our business.
Yeah.
You used the Leslie Stahl example, an experiment there. It's a giant worry in our business. It's a giant worry for anybody. that your face, that your image, that your photographs, and people can take in. This has been an issue since the rise of social media, but now with artificial intelligence and how good it can be, how close it can be, it's a giant concern. Look, at a time when our business is under attack, when you have people. Our business makes mistakes, it does, but when you also have people for political reasons attacking the fake news and so on and so forth, remember late in the campaign, the deepfakes, there were deepfake videos of both candidates put out there. And so from a news perspective, is what we're seeing legitimate? And can people then, or just doctor me or someone else in our business and put something out there that says this is a journalist saying this? It is a giant concern, which gets you back to Jim's regulation question. Speaker Johnson's argument, the Republican argument, was you can't have 50 states, you can't have a patchwork of laws. But Jim raises a great question. What are they going to do about it then? And I would add this to that conversation. Remember when the Republican Party was Washington should do the least, and the states, each individual state, that's their position on abortion, right? Each individual state should do what it does, at least it's most of their position. So there's not an intellectual consistency in the Republican argument unless they come forward, and they're right, it does pose a big national security concern, unless they come forward and say, look, we don't like Washington writing rules. In this case, we have to, and let's have a debate, an open public debate about it. But we're not there yet.
Talking to John King from CNN.
So what's the latest in Los Angeles with the protests?
I think that the time zone here obviously makes a difference in that each day, if you're on the East Coast and you're listening to this, it's still even earlier in the morning out there, and so this tends to play out later in the afternoon, East Coast time, and then into the evening. It's a huge debate about this. This is in many ways a manufactured crisis. That does not mean that there are not legitimate questions about immigration enforcement. It does not it does not imply that there aren't some instances in which the Trump administration has every right and every reason to have immigration enforcement. They have that power. But the idea that you need the National Guard and now the Marines, you've heard that, whether it's the mayor of Los Angeles or the governor of California, both Democrats, both very strong Trump critics, saying this is unnecessary. We can handle this. So I think we have to watch this play out. I do think this is yet another example of Donald Trump testing his powers as president. And many would argue, especially, we'll see what happens with the Marines. Are they just being activated so that he can tell his base, I'm sending in the troops, or do they actually get involved? We have, active duty military troops performing operations on U.S. soil. You have to invoke the Insurrection Act. Most legal experts would say for that to happen. And while there is an immigration enforcement problem in our country, there's no evidence of any insurrection per se. So this is a power play by the president, one of many, whether it's about his challenging the courts, whether it's about testing other executive authorities. It comes when we have the big Army parade celebration coming this weekend. I'm a broken record on this in our Tuesday conversations. I think it's another piece of the conversation I keep raising about, who are we as a country? What do we want? He won the election, so there's a lot of people out there who say, this is what we want. I think actions like this will keep that question front and center.
Also, Governor Newsom, I don't have the quote in front of me, has said, that and I think Mayor Bass has said the same thing, that if anything, the presence of the National Guard has exacerbated the situation, as have so many people in Trump world. Pam Bondi, Attorney General, referring to Los Angeles as a third world country, where I heard a reporter on your station who's there saying 95% of the city is like nothing has happened, just life is going on. Christie Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, we're going to hit him back, and we're going to hit him back harder than we ever have before. And here's my favorite. A reporter asked Trump yesterday about what crime, because he said I would charge him with a crime if I were the Attorney General, what crime he thinks Gavin Newsom, or Gavin Newscum, as he calls him, like a 4-year-old. Here's the question, and here's Trump.
What crime has Governor Newsom committed?
A crime has he committed? I think his primary crime is running for governor, because he's done such a bad job.
Yeah, because he hasn't committed any crime.
And by the way, we should add one more, talking about the Insurrection Act, that both the Vice President, Stephen Miller, the immigration guy, have called the protesters insurrectionists out there in Los Angeles.
John, every week I ask you the exact same question after I do a recitation like that. Is there one Republican in Congress who has said they're unhappy about how this is being handled?
There's a lot of grumbling. You don't see much public criticism. There's some questioning today on Capitol Hill of Secretary Hegseth about how you're going to pay for this. Where's the money going to come from? There hasn't been much pushback on the authority. The authority questions are coming from Democrats, not from Republicans. That hearing's ongoing, so even what I just said could be a little bit dated. I need to be careful. But no, look, will there be some Republicans who come forward and say, will there be a few? Yes, of course there will be a few. There always are a few. Will it be, back to my point about this was the constitutionally conservative party, right? Will they come forward and say, well, wait a minute, sir. Are you respecting the governor's authority of the state, whether it's a red state or a blue state? You know, the governor and the mayor, the Republicans are supposed to be about the most local control goes first, right? And then you expand if you have a question or a crisis that you need. Look, this is, again, I'm not saying there's not an immigration enforcement problem in the United States of America, but this is an escalation by Trump to pick a fight that he wants, and we could have a conversation about why. Is it he just wants to test his authority? California's going to go to court and say, you can't do this. There's a bunch of those challenges on so many different issues, questions of executive authority. You know, and they know this in the Trump White House. They're going to lose a lot of these. That's not their goal. Their goal is to win a few and expand presidential power and then go from there. Is it because, you know, his own actions and inconsistencies and sort of yo-yo approach on tariffs has hurt the economy? And so if you can go to a lot of red state communities, as I have since the inauguration, where people are saying, well, it's, you know, maybe it's a little better or maybe it's not better. Is it to change the subject is my point. We could have a debate about all those things. Was it necessary at this scale, I think is a legitimate question. And most people who have eyes on the ground there say no, that yes, you know, we can have the debate about immigration enforcement but do you need the National Guard and do you need the United States Marines, or is that poking, you know, let me put it this way. He didn't do this in South Carolina or in Nebraska.
Exactly right.
He did it in Los Angeles, California, and that is not an accident.
And he didn't do it on January 6th, obviously, although he was urged by his own family members to do something about the January 6th riot. But, you know, Chris Murphy, the Democratic senator from Connecticut, who has been a big vocal critic of Trump, has been all over the place. He said, like you said, that definitely the president, well, I don't know if you said this, but he said this, that the president is definitely not trying to keep the peace here. He's trying to inflame the situation. And his theory is it's in trying to keep people from focusing on the millions of people who are going to lose their health care and the transfer of wealth from the poor and middle class to the wealthy that the big, beautiful bill, so-called, is going to mean if it passes. That's his theory.
Well, I do think, you know, we know this from the entire history of Donald Trump, going back to 2015. If he does not like the current conversation, he does things to change the subject. It used to be the 5 a.m. tweets. Now he's back in the White House, so he has executive power. He picks fights. He just, you know, and he has, it has been a successful political tool for him to try to dominate and change the conversation when he doesn't like the conversation. I'm of the view that, you know, 99.9% of Americans, whatever your political persuasion, have common sense. And in the end, these things, you know, gravity takes hold and common sense takes hold. There's not an election tomorrow. But he does every day, you know, try to, what can I do so that I am the center of attention? And when if it's about the tariffs and he's the center of attention, he doesn't like that conversation, or it's about the stock market and he doesn't like that conversation, then yeah, he pulls the lever and changes the subject without a doubt.
You know, speaking of tariffs, which we weren't going to raise with you today, we all heard weeks ago that dozens of leaders of dozens of countries were wanting to make a deal. How many deals have they made so far?
I think they said they were going to have 90 deals in 90 days. They've not done no permanent deals. They have a couple of tentative agreements and they're moving forward. Again, that gets me back to the point about Donald Trump wants something else to be on the news and something else for us to talk about. In the end, when people go to a ballot box, they will vote on their personal economies, their personal, you know, situation. They're not going to vote about, in most cases, they're not going to vote about what happened in Los Angeles in the last several days. And, you know, we'll see how long this goes forward. They're going to vote about am I better off? Do I feel better today? Did he deliver on his promises? One of his big promises was to close the border and to bring some order to the immigration system. You're not bringing it. You might be making a point about enforcement here. And he won the election on this issue. So again, you know, he has the right. He did win a mandate to talk about this issue. Is this what people voted for, though? Using the National Guard and potentially the United States Marines to go and poke Democratic elected officials, that's a question that will be left to the voters. But the main reason he won was to lower prices and to improve the economy. And to your point about the so-called big, beautiful bill, I would just posit this. So we are now, in June, and they took office in January. And once again, Donald Trump took office, moved into the White House the second time this time. He has a full Republican Congress. And give me that impressive list of legislation he has signed, passed by that Republican Congress. Now, big things do take time. I get that. But I think that there's a reason that you want to talk about something else, because they're having a hard time getting their big, giant agenda bill done. And they're not close. They're not close. The Senate has so many issues about this, whether it's the state and local tax deduction, whether it's the Medicaid and Medicare, whether it's the fact that this bill by a Republican president who promised to dramatically reduce the deficit actually explodes the deficit. Who actually gets those tax cuts? They're nowhere close here. And so if you're trying to judge them based on you have a Republican president, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate, and I get the narrow majorities, but he said this would be easy, and he said he would get it done. So far, they haven't.
One of the things I read, I think this morning or yesterday, is that one of the problems he's having in the Senate, I'm going to get lost in the weeds, is some of the corporate tax breaks, some of the Senate Republican senators want to make permanent, which means they'll cost more money. And as a result, some of them are saying we've got to get rid of some of the other tax cuts. And two that are being talked about is not taxing overtime in certain circumstances and not taxing tips in some circumstances, which I would argue were pretty central to the Trump campaign, particularly in the Nevadas of the world and other things, which I think naively leads me to conclude that they're going to have a real hard time getting 51 votes. Am I being naive at the end of the day? Is it Mike Johnson redux that Thune does some legerdemain and they pass a bill and then we see what happens in the conference committee?
I think, will the Senate eventually feel the impulse to pass something to get to that conference committee? And will they actually have a real conference committee like they traditionally used to do it when we all went to civics class? We'll get to that question later. This is extraordinarily hard for the Senate. You'd listed right there just some of the reasons, right? Thune only has a few votes. He has a couple more than the Speaker because you can do this with 51 in the Senate, and he gets J.D. Vance, so he can really do it with 50 in the United States Senate. But there are enough senators who have legitimate policy questions here to derail this still. Thune has done a very good job so far in keeping the family together. Can he get something done? Let's give him the benefit of the doubt in this conversation. However, that something might be very different, or at least substantially different, than what the House just did. And the Speaker Johnson has been very transparent and very honest in saying, if you change a lot, I have a problem, because my guys are not going to want to take some of the things the Senate wants to do to this. So I would argue that we are still very, very early in this book. And so, again, the president talks a lot about that these things are already done or these things are happening. You just raised, Jim, I think, what is going to be the essential question of how this is viewed if they pass a bill 6 months from now, or more importantly, a year and a couple months from now, when people actually vote in the midterm elections, which is who actually benefits. Whether I'm not taking sides on overtime or tips or things like that, but that goes to blue collar workers, that goes to working class people, that goes to people who are stressed and have been stressed since the COVID pandemic and through the inflation of the Biden years. Or is it corporate tax breaks and tax breaks for the wealthy? And those people, a lot of whom voted for Trump thinking he was going to make their life, their personal economies, their family budget better. What do they think next September and October? What does the math tell them? We're nowhere near answering that question.
Well, without, again, getting lost in the weeds, I'll just say briefly, assuming those two provisions get watered down or disappear, the no taxation, again, on some overtime and some tips, I'm thinking out loud, and either of you should feel free to correct me. What is it that is in this bill that you were talking before, what voters voted for? What did they vote for? I don't think they voted for health care cuts for 10 million people or throw them off the rolls. Reduction.
Obamacare cuts.
Obamacare, food stamp cuts. Wealth transfer to the highest income people. I'm not being facetious, by the way. I don't even know what's in here.
Eliminating
I'm
everything
for
climate change.
Right, exactly. So what is marketed other than rhetoric that this is going to totally turn the economy around, just like all these tariffs are going to totally turn the economy around. What's the concrete thing that Trump markets if he loses overtime and tip taxation?
I think you're raising the key question. And you look, if it's full of business and corporate and rich people tax breaks, the markets might rally, as they did when the first Trump tax cuts passed. We had a pretty strong pre-COVID economy. Trump has a stake to make there. And there is the rising tide lifts all boats theory. But I think you make a key point. We do not know what is going to be in this final bill. We don't even know that there will be a final bill. But let's assume the Republicans figure something out at some point. Does Trump stop it and say, I won't sign anything that doesn't at least have a temporary cut on overtime? So this is what I mean, that this is going to go on. Right? We are nowhere close to this. So I can't answer those questions, but I think you raise a key question of what will they be able to look, the waitress in the casino in Vegas, or the guy I was just talking to who works for Mack Truck in Pennsylvania.
That was great.
Who wants his overtime taxes to go down or go away. What can Trump say to them in a year, and what can Republicans say to them in a year and 14 months? I think that is a defining question.
By the way, John,
not close yet, Jim.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't the Mack Truck guy the one who said that he might lose his job because of the tariffs, and he's still supporting Trump?
They're at least partly responsible. Yeah, the voters are very fair-minded. He says it's not all Trump's fault, but that he believes tariffs is a piece of the reason why Mack is going to lay off some workers at his factory, and he still supports Trump. He still hopes this works out. But he thinks the guy he voted for is going to be one reason he might lose his job next month.
Incredible.
Okay, so we only have a couple of minutes left, but we have this weird juxtaposition this coming Saturday. We have, the military parade, Donald Trump's birthday, Flag Day, and then these No More King protests planned for all across the country. I guess they can't have them in D.C. because of the military parade. You told us before that you were worried that bridges might collapse under the weight of the tanks going across the Potomac.
Shouldn't laugh.
But aside from that...
aside from that,
that could be bad.
Bridges collapsing
well,
in Washington.
I would hope maybe they're going to have one tank go at a time, or they buttress them up, or I don't know what they're doing. But the politics, the picture of the politics here are fascinating. I think, Mr. Political Commentator.
I'm all for celebrating the birthday of the United States Army. I don't know that we need a parade at a time. Look, listen to the conversation we were just having.
Yeah.
About this budget bill and about what it does to people. Do we want to have a debate about if you take Medicaid or food stamps? I'm from the King family in Dorchester, Massachusetts. There was a period in my life growing up where we were on food stamps when my dad was disabled from being a guard at the Charles Street Jail because of a massive heart attack. So my life experience tells me that most of the people who are taking government assistance are doing it because they need to.
It, yeah.
That's a digression from the idea that I don't know the exact number right now, but there are tens of millions of dollars in the budget for this parade to repair the roads after. Is that where we should be spending tens of millions of dollars? If we had to, sure. But we're going to damage those roads and then have to pay to repair them. Is there a way, if you believe, this is always my question about Washington, and maybe it comes up more so with Donald Trump. If you believe something is important to do, can you just put a bunch of adults in the room and think, what is the best way to do it in the current moment? What's the most cost-effective way? What image are we trying to do? And look, I know the Trump critics out there, and I completely get it. He's given them plenty of evidence for it, thinks that this is all about him, not about the United States Army. And he wants to show that it's authoritarian in some ways. We don't traditionally have, May Day parades or military parades in the United States of America. So I'm fascinated to see how the weekend plays out. And you mentioned the No King protests. Again, there's not an election right in front of us, but there are a lot of things stirring people. And where does that take us? I can't answer that question. I've been at this for 40 years, though, and I think we are just at a very fascinating moment in American politics where his people get energized by things like this, and the other side gets very energized by people like this. There's a tiny slice of Americans, the people who voted for Biden and then went back to Trump, voted for Biden, went back to Trump, who I think are going to have to process all this, and they will decide who controls the Congress after the midterms. In the meantime, we're going to watch this play out, and he's in power, and he likes the power, and that's why he's parade.
We are out of time, but thank you so much.
King.
Great to talk to you, John King, Chief National Correspondent from CNN, who joins us every week.
Thank you, John.
After the noon news here on GBH, BPR continues, but ends now for people up in NEPM. Thank you very much for tuning in. Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett from Boston Medical Center is going to be with us, as well as Imari Jeffries from Embrace Boston and Trenni Casey. You're listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio, right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. When a compulsive liar confesses to murder, Detective Alexa Crowe must sort fact from fiction. You'd be lying to yourself if you weren't a little intrigued. So watch My Life is Murder tomorrow night at 8 on GBH 44.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, ahead on Hour 2 of BPR Live from the Boston Public Library. Health and Human Services Secretary, alleged whale decapitator, and anti-vaxxer Robert F. Kennedy Jr. fired all 17 members of the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee. As America's faith in life-saving vaccines erodes, what tools do medical professionals have to keep trust in health sciences, not to mention our nation's most vulnerable alive? Last Boston Medical Center's Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then ahead of this year's Embrace Ideas Festival, we talk with Embrace Boston CEO Imari Jeffries. And joining both Imari at the festival and today's show is Giselle Byrd, the first black trans woman to lead a regional theater company in the United States at Boston's The Theater Offensive. All that plus our Two More Things segment next on the second hour of BPR on 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. After another day of protests yesterday over federal immigration raids, the streets of downtown Los Angeles have again calmed. Last night, President Trump ordered the mobilization of thousands more California National Guard troops. NPR's Adrian Florido says that's in addition to also saying he's deploying active-duty Marines.
Well, the Defense Department said it's bringing 700 active-duty Marines in from 29 Palms, a military base 150 miles east of L.A. A defense official told NPR they will be working with the already deployed National Guard troops. So this is a combined 4,700 military troops being deployed to Los Angeles for what so far have been largely peaceful protests with flare-ups of violence and vandalism.
NPR's Adrian Florido reporting. Heard on Fox, House Speaker Mike Johnson defends President Trump.
We're starting with the dangerous illegal aliens, and that is exactly who the rioters and the politicians in California are trying to protect, and it's incredible. While Republicans are supporting the men and women of ICE through the One Big Beautiful Bill, Democrats are fighting for those illegal aliens and against law enforcement agents.
President Trump says the deployments are necessary to restore order. However, critics accuse the president of manufacturing chaos to his own political benefit. Medical groups and public health leaders are criticizing Secretary of Health Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s decision to oust every member of a CDC panel on vaccines. Here's NPR's Will Stone.
The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices makes recommendations to the CDC on who should get vaccines and when. Kennedy has the authority to replace anyone, but his move flies in the face of precedent and has alarmed many in the medical and public health establishment who worry this could clear the way for future decisions that undermine vaccine policy. Dr. Jonathan Temte at the University of Wisconsin was chair of the committee from 2012 to 2015.
Getting rid of 17 members and replacing them, are we just looking for a rubber stamp for an unscientific, uninformed approach?
Kennedy says the firings were necessary to restore confidence in vaccines and eliminate conflicts of interest. But Temte and other experts point out the committee has strong ethics rules. Will Stone, NPR News.
The Southern Baptist Convention's meeting this week in Dallas. More than 10,000 Southern Baptist leaders will consider policy changes for the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S., Bob Smetana of Religion News Service has more.
The delegates, known as messengers, will debate a proposal to ban churches with women pastors from the 12.7 million member denomination. A similar proposal failed last year. Delegates will also deal with legal bills from a sex abuse crisis and decide the fate of their public policy arm, which has clashed with Trump supporters. For NPR News, I'm Bob Smetana.
Story collaboration between NPR and Religion News Service. It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell is one of a group of Democrats challenging the Trump administration's decision to drop federal restrictions on machine gun conversions and return thousands of previously confiscated devices. The Eagle Tribune reports that a multi-state lawsuit filed by Campbell and 15 other attorneys general yesterday in U.S. District Court in Maryland seeks to stop the ATF from redistributing the weapons which allow semi-automatic weapons to be converted into machine guns. And fans of the band, the Talking Heads, and more specifically, Mr. David Byrne, will be happy to know that he's coming out with a brand new album, his first since the 2018 critically acclaimed and award-winning American Utopia. The new LP is called Who is the Sky? It'll be released on September 5th, but the first single from it is called Everybody Laughs, and it's out today.
Everybody wonders what you're gonna do. Everything is closer, everything is true. Everybody's starting everything again. Everybody's outside now, they're coming in. Everybody's going through the garden.
Sounds good. Dave Byrne will be also touring North America in support of the LP. The first stop is September 14th in Providence, Rhode Island, a city he knows very well from his days as a student at the Rhode Island School of Design, and then he's doing 2 nights at the Bach-Wang Center in Boston, October 3rd and 4th. Nice new music. Red Sox-Rays play Game 2 of their series tonight at Fenway. It's 62 degrees and raining in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive. Progressive Commercial Insurance protects small businesses from retailers to tradespeople. Progressive covers a variety of business needs with a range of coverages. More at progressivecommercial.com.
Here's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you very much. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back here tomorrow and again on Friday with our live music segment as always. The mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, is going to be with us 1 to 2 on the 17th of June. And Governor Maura Healey is going to be with us from 11 to noon on June 25th. Hello again, Jim.
I may sneeze in a second, so if I do, can you...
I can take over. I can take over.
We'll
cover you. That's right.
We're joined now at the library by Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett. I think it passed, actually. I'm good. Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at Boston University Medical School, and an Aspen Institute Health Innovators Fellow, whatever that means. Doctor, it's great to see you.
Wonderful to see you.
What does that mean? What does it mean?
It's a group of leaders from all around the country who are working to make healthcare better in all different sectors. Yeah.
Good. Well, good, because they can't come soon enough with this guy who's running the health department here, RFK Jr., who I don't think is a normal person, but he has now fired these CDC people. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so I think the last time I was on, we talked about sort of RFK, HHS Secretary, delivering news over X, and so now sort of follows in suit that we learned from the Wall Street Journal in an op-ed that he wrote yesterday, that was published yesterday, that all 17 members of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, otherwise known as ACIP, will be dismissed. So all 17 of those members learned about their dismissal from the Wall Street Journal op-ed. And why is this even significant? So I think we've talked so much about how vaccines and how so many things kind of go from being studied and then how they get disseminated to us and to our clinics and our CVSs, et cetera. So for those of you who are listening and those of you in the audience, you should know the process where FDA is the one that determines what's safe and effective, right? So they do all the studies, they really decide what should come down, and then the ACIP decides who should get it and when. Okay, so that's the tunnel right now. So, and the ACIP has been filled with independent experts from epidemiology, pediatricians, internal medicine, et cetera, people who have spent their careers studying trials, safety, efficacy. And then whatever the ACIP determines in terms of who should get what and when, then goes to the insurers and others to say, okay, you said we could do or we should do, X vaccine at this time, and therefore it has to be covered by insurance companies. So that's the situation. That's what has traditionally been the situation. ACIP recommendations usually get signed off by the head of CDC before it goes to the public. I want to remind people that we have no current head of the CDC. So the ACIP recommendations have to be signed off by the HHS. So think about what's happening. So Secretary Kennedy has dismissed 17 people who he says have conflict of interest, never say no to any vaccines, and I'll sort of go through each of those points which can be refuted. And then on top of that, he's going to put 17 of his own people in, and then they report back to him. So it's a one-person show. In terms of how recommendations are going to be put forward.
And we know what the recommendations are going to be. I think we don't know who the replacements are. Even
we don't know yet.
The conventional wisdom is he has picked them because he said there's going to be a meeting later in June.
In 2 weeks.
And I never say things like the following on the air because I don't like when other people do, but I'm going to say people are going to die. And how do you know people are going to die? Because you're not a doctor, Jim. Because I read about what he did in Samoa, and which he lied about in his testimony before Congress, where he goes there, spreads his BS about vaccines around measles. And according to health officials and leaders in Samoa, dozens of people died, mostly children, because they followed his totally bogus, lunatic, homicidal advice about measles vaccines. And when he replaces these experts with people who subscribe to his anti-vax sickness, it's going to cause even more people, you face this every day, who have doubts about vaccines, or for those doubts to be accentuated. It's horrifying.
What this seems to me is happening, bottom line, correct me if I'm wrong, is that he's probably going to get people that are like-minded to replace the 17 that he's fired.
Correct.
And so they're going to say you don't really need these vaccines. Like he said, children and pregnant women didn't need the COVID vaccines. And then it could happen that their insurance won't pay for those vaccines. So instead of going to CVS and getting your free COVID vaccine, I've read it could be like $180 for a vaccine.
183.
Yeah, $183 for a vaccine.
Yeah.
So that's what I fear.
But you're skipping a step. Most people, not most, a lot of additional people aren't going to go. And find out it's $180.
There's that too.
I don't need to go because the Secretary of Health and Human Services
doesn't need to go. But those people that want to go may not be able to afford to go.
Exactly.
I will just also point out that the last time I was on, we talked a lot about the MAHA kind of large body of evidence or non-evidence
Make America
that was put
Healthy
out.
Again.
Yes, Make America Healthy Again, which is really focused on children's health. So I want to remind people that the ACIP is actually the one that also puts out recommendations for the Vaccines for Children program. So about 50% of children in our country depend on this program to get free vaccines. So if the ACIP is recommending taking certain vaccines out, those children, millions of children will no longer have access to those vaccines.
So are we going
Can I have one more fact that we mentioned yesterday when Dr. Ashish Jha was with us? Is already, before this sickness coming from Kennedy, the data that we mentioned yesterday, 78% of the 2,066 counties in this country have already seen a decline in vaccination of young kids for mumps, measles, and
Correct.
rubella already
Yeah.
before the crap that's going to come out of HHS.
And the acceleration of what will happen with states being really differentiated in terms of how they pursue the way that they vaccinate their population. So for instance, in Massachusetts, we could still choose to cover vaccines through our own methodology. So it will really become state dependent. And remember, obviously, everybody knows this, there is no situation in which an epidemic doesn't cross state lines. Right? So we're going to have more and more children, is obviously a concern, but pregnant people, I know we'll talk about that too, who will no longer be vaccinated and therefore set up a real opportunity for disease to spread.
You know, you're not a lawyer, obviously, but I do wonder, do the children who are immunocompromised one way or another that could be very sick, if not die, if they get measles, do they have no rights? Because they'll be going into public schools with children who are unvaccinated.
Yeah, I am certainly not a lawyer in this situation, nor any situation, but it is, remember that what has currently been put out by the CDC in the past and Secretary Kennedy is that there still will be vaccines for children who are immunocompromised. So we don't know what's going to come. We don't know what's going to come out in terms of these ACIP. You know, they may, with the new guidance, they may say, you know, these vaccines people who are immunocompromised can get and others can't, similar to what's happening with the COVID vaccines or what has happened, you know, and again, when Secretary RFK went out a couple weeks ago on X and announced COVID vaccines would no longer be available for children and pregnant people, that was walked back actually within 24 to 48 hours, which I was right after I got off the air with you all, I felt very vindicated, but just for children, not for pregnant people. So now we know that people like myself, family medicine doctors who do prenatal care, but also obstetrician, gynecologists, we're stepping together to continue to inform our patients that the science around COVID vaccines for pregnant women has not changed. The sort of dogma that's gone around it has changed. And so not to get confused by the politics and the science. I mean, this is the message again and again and again. How do we take out the science from the politics? And obviously it is an incredibly difficult time to be doing that work, but we know the COVID vaccines are safe and effective for pregnant people, and women who are pregnant are very high risk from getting very sick from COVID-19, not to mention their newborns. If their mothers haven't been vaccinated less than 6 months, those are the most likely newborns to be hospitalized from COVID-19. So we have to stick with the data and continue to do it one-on-one, but it makes my job and so many of our jobs so difficult.
Speaking of your jobs, we're going to talk about other atrocities coming out of RFK Jr.'s mouth, but we'll table that for a second. There's a wonderful and horrible piece in the Globe magazine the other day about the decline in trust that patients feel. It's still high in their doctors. It's still high, but lower, roughly 10% lower than it was a few years ago. The role model for how to establish or reestablish trust in this long Globe magazine piece is you.
Yes.
They cite you repeatedly about how you've dealt with patients who are skeptics, who in the past have felt treated poorly or sort of half-assed attention from prior doctors. Spend a minute or two talking about what you try to do to make sure that the person sitting across from you trusts that you'll listen and be straight with them.
Well, first, I just want to start by sharing that trust is a social determinant of health. So in the Institute of Medicine report that came out in 2013, they listed trust as a major factor in terms of how people access health, how people then take whatever kind of information is given to them and bring it into their lives. Again, what we're seeing now in terms of what people are then more receptive to if they don't trust the healthcare system. So it's been something that I've thought about, and my colleagues have thought about very deeply, especially as it's accelerated with everything we're talking about in the politics and the pandemic. And to your point, Jim, so the Kaiser Family Foundation came out with a study saying that 10% of Americans report lower trust in healthcare systems. I would say that's probably much greater in certain areas of the country. So, to me, there's a lot of pieces that kind of go into it. Honestly, I don't think it's anything magic. I think it's really sitting across from a patient and treating them as a full human being and treating them as the expert on their body. I think medicine so traditionally talks about, teaches us that we are the only experts and people don't understand their own bodies or their own healthcare journey. And if we take the expertise of the patient and then drive it forward and actually trust what they're saying to us, then that's the first step of trust. And then you continue to show up and you continue to do what you say you'll do. And you work with people to navigate this incredibly complex healthcare system that is incredibly broken and yet has real opportunity for healing, I think, through the human connection.
But what do you do to dig deeper and focus on one demographic?
Yeah.
The vast majority of your clients, I think, are
patients.
People of color.
That's correct.
Patients. And some older patients of color, I'm sure, know about the Tuskegee syphilis study in which people were lied to. And we discussed many times on the show, one of the most frightening things, because it's so contemporary, that survey of white medical trainees 5 or 6 years ago, in which close to half, I repeat, almost half of the medical trainees, residents or whatever the hell they are about to become doctors, thought that black people had thicker skin and that they had less sensitive nerve endings.
Yeah.
You're a white doctor.
Yep.
When a black patient comes to you, even if they don't mention that, it's in their head if they've heard it or that. How do you address that when they're
Well, part of it is naming what, kind of historical and present day harms that people have gone through. So to actually bring the elephant in the room into the room and be really clear, talking about there are reasons for mistrust and honoring that and working with, creating as much evidence for folks. I work as a PI on vaccine trials, actually, and I think it's really important that folks who have been traditionally marginalized from clinical trials get at the table. This is part of what makes healthcare and healthcare delivery more equitable. The other thing is actually bringing healthcare providers and patients together in dialogue and trainings, and that's part of what I'm doing with a group of collaborators, including Everyday Boston, who you know well.
Which is a fabulous organization.
And thinking about the power of stories and storytelling to actually create more trust between providers and patients and bringing these. So everything I'm doing is community-led, and then bringing this curriculum out into the community and then creating tools for providers to use moving forward. So this is slow, it's hard, but I think it's critical work.
And also, you have to have the time to do that with an individual one-on-one patient, which
you
I think
do,
is hard.
But you can actually make a lot out of the time you have. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know how 10 minutes feels when somebody's lithing to you versus 10 minutes when somebody's clearly not listening to you. It feels really different.
Yeah. One quick thing. I've always thought that obstetrics runs the wrong way because 90% of the time you get to the hospital, you've never seen the doctor who's there to deliver your baby.
Right.
And I remember I went to the midwife service at the Brigham, and I thought that was great because you had one midwife every appointment. So when you had the baby, especially if it's your first kid, you would know the person that was there. And they've gotten away from that. It seems to me it almost breeds, especially when you're so nervous about your first delivery.
Yeah.
It almost breeds nerve-wrackingness instead of having several doctors in the same practice and they'd rotate so you'd meet them all.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of, just like it's very difficult lifestyle-wise to always be showing up for your patients for their delivery. I will say, again, as a family medicine doctor, we take care of people through their entire prenatal course, and then we can guarantee that they have a family medicine doctor doing the delivery if it's the right, acuity and risk for the patient, and then we see them and their babies. So
that's a big deal.
There are models where there can be more continuity, but I think that relationship is critical. It doesn't have to be during the delivery. There are plenty of amazing providers doing relationship work, but I was really happy Felice Fryer covered that. I certainly didn't pitch it to her. Yeah, she did a great job.
You know, the one thing I have to quarrel with you with, even though I know you're inside and see it, I've had, this is an opportunity for Marjorie to joke about how many doctors I have on retainer.
I think he has 9.
I do have, I have visited quite a few medical professionals. And my first 2 primary care physicians who were epically great when I moved to Boston 35 years ago, whatever, this is long before any Trump, any Kennedy, any whatever, quit the profession. One moved away from patients, one totally quit the profession because of how little time they had to talk to a patient. And so you fast forward 30 years when the pressure is greater, and I'm dubious that you're typical. Meaning, I don't mean because doctors don't want to do the right thing with a patient that understandably doesn't trust the profession or them in particular, but when you have X number of minutes and then you got to see somebody else X number of minutes later, doesn't that, what you're describing, often go by the wayside?
You do not need to quarrel with me. I mean, I will be the very first person to say it is becoming more and more of a toxic environment. I have gone to, I've spoken here at length. I write op-eds all the time about the crisis of primary care, how we need to invest more in primary care, and part of that is creating more opportunity, more time, more investment for the things we do. I mean, specialists get paid way more than we do for the same exact procedures. So yes, 100%. But if you actually, part of the joy of being a primary care doctor is that long-term relationship. So if you are working to sustain that joy, prioritizing that is one of the core centerpieces.
We're talking to Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett.
So we only have a few more minutes. Do you want to talk about RFK and experimental therapies?
No, I want to talk about something good. Let's talk about how payments
He's not going to give you vaccines.
Oh, yes.
This is happening at BMC.
It's another cool BMC thing.
This is where there are payments to people who are using drugs to stay sober. I think it's called contingency management.
Correct.
I don't know why, but apparently it works. Explain it and tell us why it works.
Yeah, well, actually, and it is very close to home because this article is talking about what we do in my clinic. So,
really?
Oh,
yeah,
great.
in my clinic. It was started in my clinic.
You got 2 hits in just a few days.
But go ahead.
So the what Jim is speaking about, something called contingency management, which is a new strategy or new-ish strategy that has shown very positive benefits for people who are struggling with stimulant use disorder. So reminder to your listeners, there's things like meth and cocaine, really different from opioids. We know that for opioids, we have things like methadone that are effective for treatment. For stimulants, we don't have the same kind of medication that's really effective to mitigate the symptoms and help folks come off the stimulant. So what we have seen, though, which, interestingly, if we think about the way that the brain reward system works, is that we have seen programs, including at BMC, where people with a stimulant use disorder, for every time they come in with a urine and the urine doesn't have stimulants in it, they get $5 on their debit card for food, whatever it might be. If they go to the gym, which we know can be very efficacious in helping kind of mitigate some of those cravings, they get another $5. So it's really thinking about how do you kind of create pathways for healthy lifestyle. And we at BMC, so we got a 2021 grant from Massachusetts Department of Health, DPH, and there we thought we were just going to have like 60 people come. We have had 660 people come since its inception.
Wow.
Our clinic is bursting with this START clinic, and I love it because it's also, it's amongst everything else we do. We have newborns coming, and we also have people who are, working to reclaim their their journey with stimulant use disorder. And now it's gone to healthcare for the homeless and all these other clinics.
You're going to have to work really fast, though, because if it's actually helping poor people, Trump's going to eliminate it. So you got to really work.
I know. Well, hide the evidence.
Can you explain to me, for us for a second, is the reason it works because sometimes the money is short money. It's not, you're not like getting $100.
Yeah, $5.
And is it because the reward satisfies the same part of the brain?
It's a dopamine,
it is.
Yeah, it's like it hits the same dopamine receptors as a reward. Yeah, I mean it's part of what I think is really interesting. Like even though I know we can't talk about GLP-1s and how they're completely devastating our economy. But the interesting thing about GLP-1 is the same sort of thing. It hits the same place where, there's all kinds of addictive pathways.
Paul Revel, former Secretary of Education, is regular. His son, is he from Providence? Is that where he's working? Somewhere in Rhode Island.
I think so.
He came in and said every addiction thing, not only
could be helped with GLP-1.
not only your weight,
shopping too
but
much
shopping
on
addiction.
Amazon.
It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, but it's bankrupting us.
I understand that.
Yeah. So I was actually at a meeting yesterday for primary care and with insurers and payers and all the people who were quoted in yesterday's Globe article talking about how insurance companies are asking for 13% greater input to cover people, individuals and small businesses, in large part because of rates of inflation around pharmaceutical costs.
Can we just spend a minute on this, which I don't we've discussed maybe with you, but with a number of people in the healthcare field. My understanding is the bulk of the coverage that is allowed by insurance or a Mass Health or whatever the hell it is not if the sole issue that you're trying to address is obesity. But what I've learned from you and other people like you through the years here, being obese leads to so many other ailments that it would seem to me that down the line, the financial balance sheet for these insurers is a plus because you're not going to contract all these horrible things. So
no, we've talked about this before. It's this whole idea that in medicine in the U.S., you treat things when they get really bad, but not beforehand. And that's why we don't get paid to do preventive health, right? You get paid to take somebody's limb off, but you don't get paid what it means to get them to exercise and have better blood pressure control.
Yeah, but that's sort of neat, though, and the idea that people are looking forward to getting this.
I think it's fabulous, and I feel really proud to be working alongside my colleagues who are doing this at BMC.
You should. Congratulations on this and everything else. I don't know how your spirits stay up like they apparently do, but it's great to see you.
One last quick question before you go.
Sorry.
I just wondered if people that you work with at BMC, which has a lot of people that are struggling financially, do they know what's going on with Medicaid?
Well, I mean, BMC itself is acutely aware of what's happening in Medicaid. You're asking about the patients?
They're asking.
I think a large number of people have a good sense of what is coming. I think when it actually impacts people in the day-to-day, it will be really hard to stomach. So right now,
because Mass Health is one of the best state insurance programs in the country.
We run on Medicaid dollars largely. So I think it's again, there's a lot of fear mongering out there. I think once the rubber hits the road, we'll see what actually happens. And again, just grateful to be in a place like Massachusetts where they can help protect some of the impact on our patients. To a point. 100% correct.
I'll try it again. Nice to see you.
Wonderful seeing you.
Very much.
Goodbye.
Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett.
We have
Great
been
to see
speaking
you.
with Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett, who's Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor of Boston University's Medical School, and an Aspen Institute Health Innovators Fellow. After a quick break, the Embrace Ideas Festival begins next week. We're going to get a preview from Embrace Boston's Imari Jeffries and Giselle Byrd of the Theater Offensive. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, and we are at the Boston Public Library in the rain.
Trusted, local, News.
Worcester County's homeless population is up about 20% over the last year.
GBH News.
The commission is a body dedicated to fostering stronger ties with Ireland, focusing on trade and mutual economic support.
Here for what matters to you.
15 communities around Massachusetts have received grants from the State Clean Energy Center for on-street EV charging stations.
GBH 89.7, online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Beacon Circle patron Jane Alpers, proud to support GBH and the commitment to local, national, and global journalism that inspires, engages, and supports diversity in the community. And Brighton Farmers Market, Wednesday afternoons from 2 to 6:30 on Brighton Common in Boston, June through October, featuring a variety of local foods, farm fresh produce, children's activities, and live music.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're back here tomorrow and Friday. Mayor Wu joins us for an hour at the library, 1 to 2 on June 17th. Governor Healy joins us for an hour at the library, 11 to noon on June 25th. Next Wednesday and Friday, that's June 18th and 20th, Embrace Boston hosts their 4th annual Embrace Ideas Festival, celebrating, quote, Black brilliance, creativity, and community. Expect panels with local and national leaders, live music, a potato salad off. That's what I'm interested in. We'll explain that in a minute. Right now, here live at the BPL's Embrace Boston CEO Imari Paris Jeffries. Great to see you, Imari, as always.
Great seeing you both.
Also here is Giselle Byrd, who in her role as executive director of the Theater Offensive became the first Black trans woman to lead a regional theater company in the U.S. She also serves on Governor Healy's commission on the status of women. Giselle's participating in festival discussions on Black pride in public space and the arts. You can find tickets to this whole thing. We went last year. It's spectacular. And info, you go to embraceideasfestival.org. Imari, great to see you. Giselle, great to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Great seeing you both.
Can I ask you a question before we start? I just realized I went to the opening, ribbon cutting the other day of Flower Boston Common, and one of the things I ate was the muffin that is in the shape of Embrace Boston.
Guaranteed deliciousness and guaranteed 750 calories, but worth it.
Is it 750 calories, though?
Fabulous.
So what? But
isn't
how
it great?
clever.
Isn't it great?
It made me happy. I try not to eat one every day. And I do walk over there and try to grab one for people.
It's beautiful.
It's amazing. We're so proud of that partnership.
But you can bake something like that. You know, these people.
You're getting a piece of the action, are you not?
You know what we're fortunate to have happen when we built the Embrace. We were able, and Hank Willis Thomas, who was the artist, gave us the 2-dimensional and some 3-dimensional derivatives of the Embrace, and so we were able to support ourselves through these derivatives of the Embrace.
Oh, neat!
Terrific. Good
Okay,
to see you both.
so elaborate a little bit, Imari, on what Jim said about what people will see and hear between the 18th and the 20th.
Well, when we started the Embrace Ideas Festival a few years ago, it was during the pandemic. It was online. We had a small gathering in Nubian Square, and it was before Juneteenth was an official holiday. And so 4 years later, when we think about the climate that we're in now more than ever, it's important for us to double down on this federal holiday, to double down on the historic significance and the current context of Juneteenth in 2025.
And what are you doing exactly for those 2 days?
Well, there's 2 important things that are happening. One is the Embrace Honors that's happening the day before the actual Juneteenth holiday. And so, as you know, we memorialize civic leaders in Boston from 1995 to 2020. These civic leaders will be enshrined on our next major monument in Boston. And so there's 5 couples that received the Martin and Coretta Award during that session. And then we have a 1-day conference. We've shrunk it down to 1 day just this year. And Giselle is one of our featured speakers. We're so proud and excited to hear all the wonderful wisdom from her.
Before we get to Giselle, we went to the last time you honored 5 couples, and as we've said here repeatedly, everybody from Charlie Baker and his wife to Deval Patrick and his wife to the 3 other honorees couples danced up to the stage. Is that going to happen again?
You'll see some dancing, but it will be more of a gospel spirit. So it's all white. God. It's more of a jubilee, and it's really in the spirit of Juneteenth. So it's a jubilee celebration, gospel, and so there'll be gospel serenading of these 5 civic leader couples in our city.
Well, I never saw anything like that. Giselle, what's your role in all this? How'd you get involved?
God, I don't even know. So it was. Imari has quickly become a brother to me since I moved to Boston. I'm from Augusta, Georgia originally, and I moved for the role at the Theater Offensive, and that changed my life very dramatically. And then to be appointed to Governor Healey's commission, I really take this role and these multitude of roles very seriously. And it's about being in fellowship with your community and being reminded that we have to get through these very tumultuous times together, but also to remind one another that this is a time of rebellion, it's a time of revolution, it's a time of protest, and any time that we find fellowship with one another, we are combating the active systems of oppression that are against us.
You know, my sense from afar is there's not enough rebellion. And it
agree.
seems to me that while every day we read a headline where someone says, well, we're not using the term DEI anymore, but believe me, our mission hasn't changed kind of thing.
Right.
It seems that this festival is trying to take everything in the exact opposite direction, sort of through the arts. Is that a fair way to describe what the agenda is here?
That is. This administration is now an art expert and has dipped their fingers into a realm that we haven't seen an administration dip their fingers into. And so it's important for organizations like ours to double down on what it means to express stories of hope, express queer stories, Black stories, stories of music, Latinx stories, more stories than are normally told, and I think art is the perfect venue to do that.
Giselle, one last related question. I'm
we
sorry,
should elaborate the Theater Offensive, though, so people don't.
Yeah,
tell us more about that.
So for sure, so the Theater Offensive, our mission is to present liberating art by, for, and about queer and trans people of color that transcends artistic boundaries, celebrates cultural abundance, and dismantles oppression. Heavy on the last part nowadays. And so what we aim to do at TTO is make sure that there is a liberatory space for all, and also beyond your artistry, what do you need for your humanity? I think we've lived in a world where arts and culture is solely self-serving, where it's we take care of the people who work for us and we put up the exhibitions or we put on the show, but then the moment those people leave your doors, nothing happens for them. And so my duty as executive director is to truly transform that narrative and take care of the core of your humanity. And so what we're now doing and have always been doing, because we started in 1989 as an HIV/AIDS arts activist organization combating the government's lack of response to the crisis, which is still ongoing, was really taking care of the people who come to experience art, who come for that escape. And so that is what we're continuing. You know, we sued the National Endowment for the Arts.
Yeah, you're one of the plaintiffs.
Yes.
The NEA has said essentially the gender ideology, whatever that means to them, can no longer be something that is part of a grantee. And you're plaintiffs suing about this.
Yes, we are.
Saying what?
So basically, it violates your First and Fifth Amendment rights and the American Procedure Act. This is nothing new. Trans, non-binary, and gender-expansive people have always faced this type of oppression. But what is unique is that the government's position around this gender ideology, which is just harmful rhetoric to get the masses against trans, non-binary, and gender-expansive folks, which, let's be clear, helped and really defined the arts and culture movement of this country. There is no way you would have some of the activities that we do today without trans, non-binary, and gender-expansive folks. And so what we're suing is basically saying it's illegal, it's against the law, and you know it is. And their response has often been that it's not in the good of the American people. But when we think about how art has healed people, how it has saved so many lives, we have been at the forefront of creating those spaces of healing.
That voice is Giselle Byrd's Executive Director of the Theater Offensive, and she is joined by the head of Embrace Boston, Imari Paris Jeffries.
You're looking at me. I think you wanted to add something to that.
No, the choir is saying amen.
Oh, the choir is saying amen. Okay. Well, Jim talked about before, and you're both talking about, this backlash on DEI. If you look at the civil rights movement, everybody talks about this now, the slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, the civil rights movement, the backlash to Barack Obama, all that kind of stuff. But I wonder, because I think some people are, African Americans have been screwed for so long in this country. I think some of the blue-eyed blondes are a little shocked by this, because they haven't usually thought to themselves as being under the thumb of the government.
Coming from a blue-eyed blonde.
That's my point. That's my point. I haven't grown up with expecting I was going to experience racism, obviously. But so what can we learn for the civil rights movement? Because the civil rights movement, leaders in that movement talk about this all the time, that one step forward, backwards. What can we learn from that, you think?
I think Giselle was alluding to this. Oftentimes in the civil rights movement, and when you think about mutual aid or direct service organizations, particularly for Black folks or other civil rights organizations, it was about participating in democracy. You wanted this kid to get a better education because education was part of the promissory note of democracy. You wanted this family to have an opportunity for a home because a home was part of the promissory note of democracy. You wanted this family to have an opportunity for health because health was, and public health is, a part of the democracy, the promissory note of democracy. And what has happened now, all of these things, all the civil rights movements, which has been about preparing people, saying we are worthy, providing protection so that we can participate in democracy, the funds for those promissory notes have been removed. And so all of us are now having a conversation around what's democracy. And so I think the common thread of all of these funding cuts, the common thread of all of this removement of the NIH funding, NEA funding, funding for housing, these ICE raids, right? Like, who is a citizen has also been a conversation about democracy, the 14th Amendment. And so when we're having these conversations from a civil rights lens, it was always about democracy. And I think what Giselle alluded to, how do art organizations think about our art space as democratic maintenance spaces? And now more than ever, arts organizations must see their spaces as places for democratic maintenance. We cannot wait to do the democratic maintenance 3 months before an election cycle, and voting is our only means to participate in democracy.
Speaking about this whole effort that you're both involved in here, Giselle, as I'm thinking, we read a story in the Globe today about how Williams College in Western Mass is saying that, at least temporarily, they will not accept any money from NIH or the National Science Foundation because of their pronouncements on DEI. Why do you think there are so few Williams colleges in the world who, the vast majority, I think, of organizations have their heads down, hoping that no one notices they're there. Some capitulate or try to cut a deal. Some fight because they have no choice. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to Harvard, but they fought because they really had no choice. Williams does have a choice. Why aren't there more Williamses in your estimation?
Because white supremacy rules the land. Let's name it. Let's call it for what it is. This country's democracy was founded on the principles of white supremacy. There wasn't ever a liberty and justice for all people. And so when we think about places like Williams College or even the Theater Offensive, who decided to sue the government, it is because we recognize that we as arts institutions or as places of higher learning are responsible for the humanity of the people who pay to go to the school, who come to see the show, and people are afraid of the harms of ending up being on the margins. Like you were saying, Marjorie, you were like, I didn't expect to be on the margins. Everyone is on the margins right now.
That's right.
And the big clutching of the pearls that's happening is that people did not expect, especially white people, did not expect this moment was going to affect them. But when you come and combat schools, you have to examine also, why are they coming after Harvard? Why are they coming after, all of these different types of institutions that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion? It is because they want white Christian nationalist rhetoric to sweep this country. And so what we have to do is remind people through actions such as divesting from a system meant to destroy us, that we do not need it. We will find other ways to sustain. You think about these historical movements, such as Pride, which was a protest, such as the Civil Rights Movement, and the suffragist movement, which was also exclusionary and didn't include women of color. But you have to remember that these moments call for divesting from that system and taking care of one another and using community dollars to fund the community and to pour into the community what they need. And so people are afraid. And and it's rightfully so, it's fascism. That's what it is. People have a fear, and it's understandable. But when you recognize that there is so much more power, especially arts institutions recognize how much power they really have in changing the narrative and changing how their community perceives what's happening, that's when we'll wake up and actually get some things done.
You know, this is really hard to ask after something as inspirational as that last 90 seconds from you. But for Imari, for you, I hadn't even thought of this until I realized this is all, your event is centered around Juneteenth. In light of the fact that Trump has spared nothing and no one that celebrates anything other than white men even taking names off the ships as we discussed last week.
Yeah.
Why has he not targeted Juneteenth and Martin Luther King's birthday, as far as you know?
You know, it's probably coming. I think it's probably lower down on the list, and we
have to give him time.
And HBCUs, these holidays are a little bit more institutional. They're part of the structure. But you see what happened at the Smithsonian, the Museum of African American History, and even our own locally. It is going to happen. We see some of the Confederate monuments in some places being raised. Being put back up. And so we anticipate that is going to happen. And I think now more than ever, we see the offensive being to celebrate harder, celebrate louder, to put more monuments. We are unveiling with a group in Great Barrington next month with the Great Barrington Sculpture Project, a W.E.B. Du Bois monument. And so this will be our second monument. We're unveiling 10 historic plaques on buildings across Massachusetts. So those will be our 10 more monuments, right? So we'll be up to 12 monuments over the last 5 years. And so we're doubling down on our presence. More monuments to love, more monuments to people of color.
Do you find, because of the stress that people are feeling from so many directions, is there a higher interest in this, what you're doing next week, than you think there might ordinarily be, that people are looking for spaces like this?
I say yes and no. People are looking for spaces, but I think people are also nervous about funding spaces publicly. And so,
are you having is that affecting you?
It's not. It is very, very difficult to raise resources these days. And
what do people say to you?
We've had some folks who have supported us, and they don't want the visibility in the past. I think so. We'll take the support. It's people have to do what they need to do for their own survival, and so we'll take the support. And I think some of our philanthropic partners have had to fill the gaps in federal government, and so while in the past we might have received a bigger part for our own operations, it's been smaller because they've had to do the right thing and fund more organizations, which is the right thing to do. Which is the right thing to do.
Well, you're saying that, but when you go home at night and you don't have to be...
I'm scared to death about fundraising right now.
I was just going to say, but how do you feel about that entity, we won't name anybody, that says you can have our money, but we really want to on the down low in terms of our name because of our... How does that feel? Considering what you're doing and how you're trying to do it, Imari.
I think if it doesn't compromise our humanity, I do think we have to take a closer look with the language that we have used. Perhaps the language that we have used in the past did not land in the way that we hoped it would.
Like what?
And I think some of the DEI language might have been, for some folks, performative. And if you ask some people, the rural farmer in Arkansas, that language doesn't resonate with them. I hearken back to, most of us in college or even in high school, if you remember Maslow's hierarchy of need, that triangle.
Yeah.
And so at the bottom it was food, shelter, clothing, safety, belonging, love, and self-actualization. We're having self-actualization conversations with folks who are really having physiological need conversations. The reasons that higher education institutions take care of your room and board, form clubs that you can join, provide public safety, they provide those things when you go to a boarding college so that you get that knowledge and you can self-actualize and then apply that self-actualization to the world. So they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so we've been having self-actualization conversations with people, half of the people apparently who voted for Trump, across this country who are having food, shelter, clothing conversations. And if this election was about inflation, if this election was about the boogeyman coming to take their stuff, if it was about the poverty of empathy and zero-sum thinking, when you're dealing with food, shelter, clothing, you can see why a newly naturalized person, when you're talking about someone else that's taking their stuff, would vote against their interest when they're having self-actualization, physiological need conversations.
Can I just say one thing since we're out of time? And by the way, we're going to give the web address for the festival, but if you're interested in the Theater Offensive, it's thetheateroffensive.org if you want to check it out. We have been to a lot of your events, and if people are feeling stressed and pained and threatened, there's as much joy and hope that comes out of these things. Well, they're reality-based as anything I've been to in this city. So we really urge people to participate both days. I'm sure they're going to be great. It's great to meet you.
Great to meet
I hope to see you
you.
again. And Imari, as always, it's great to see you.
Thank you. And I have a few gifts for you.
I sure hope so. What do you have?
And so we have Juneteenth embraces.
thank you.
Bring them down.
Thank you very much.
For you all. And we have some shirts that you can wear.
Oh my God!
Wow!
For Juneteenth.
Look at you being Oprah.
Yeah, that's right. I love it. Thank you very much.
Do you have a flour muffin in that bag, or you
As a
don't?
matter of fact, no, I'm just joking.
Oh wow, this is a great one.
Thank you. It's great.
This is a
Really
great with all the
appreciate it.
names, everybody in the back that's sponsoring it. Okay, let me give the website if people want to get tickets and more information about what's going on here. It's embraceideasfestival.org. Just one word, embraceideasfestival.org. And the festival begins June 18th, and we've been speaking with Imari Jeffries, CEO of Embrace Boston, and Giselle Byrd, Executive Director of the Theater Offensive. And thank you for coming in. And thank you for the inspirational conversation.
Thank
Okay, up next, it's time for our Two More Things segment. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, reaction from local veterans about the Trump administration's deployment of National Guard troops and Marines to Los Angeles. Primary care doctors in the Mass General Brigham system claim that management is trying to stymie union efforts. And as climate change drives rising sea levels, millions of Americans are finding themselves in potential flood zones. It's all starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Rockland Trust Bank, helping foster healthy relationships with money by providing education and resources to the community, one neighborhood at a time. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And the Boston Early Music Festival with opera, concerts, and more, now through June 15th, featuring the fully staged North American premiere of Reinhard Kaiser's 1705 opera, Octavia. BEMF.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie and Jim Browdy live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Just enough time in the hour for two more things, or at least one more thing. Marjorie, you go first.
Well, we were just talking about issues involving trans people, LGBTQ community. So listen to this. Up in New Hampshire, a social media post, this is from the Globe, that listed a bunch of LGBTQ Pride Month events in New Hampshire that was on there. The Division of Travel and Tourism Development's website was deleted. Apparently this guy that would work for various GOP candidates and campaigns up there and some other Republicans, they were upset about it. They did not think this was a good idea. Here was they included this text encouraging people to, quote, celebrate love all month long with pride events, festivals, parades. They didn't like it, and they got rid of it. It was reinstated, but that's what they initially did up there in New Hampshire, this government agency. They got rid of this. They thought it was not to be up there. No information about how to get to these pride events or anything else. So it just shows.
To what end? Just to please Donald Trump? What was the point?
Well, they said they didn't think that the message should be there, especially on D-Day. Of course, it's going on for days after that, but they thought that was bad. As if there were no gay people in those graves in Normandy in France. Anyway, that's my little thing.
Well, my little thing is, you may know, as of May 7th, you need a real ID for domestic flights. I mean, you have a passport, it's okay, and for access to federal buildings, unless Trump bars you from those federal buildings. Now, a lot of people, Marjorie, failed to get their real ID. Did you get one?
No, I have not.
Well, there may be a solution, an alternative. Some people think a Costco card, can we put that up, please, that has a gold star just like the real ID does. Now, for those familiar with rotisserie chicken the size of my Tesla for $4.99 or a huge hot dog and a huge drink for $1.50, the good news is it will get you into Costco. The bad news, which does seem unfair, despite that similar gold star, it's not going to get you on a domestic flight. But on a somewhat related note, very somewhat, only a few seconds, Jim, Chloe Gray, you know who she is? Good. She's some kind of influencer.
Okay, influencer.
Did get a rotisserie chicken from Whole Foods, not Costco, past TSA and onto a flight out of Newark Airport. What do you think of that?
Well, it's Wild West at the Newark Airport, from what I understand. I guess it's on the ground.
Can you
and in
imagine
the
how good you feel? You get a rotisserie chicken through TSA and into the cabin, and you just chomp away at that baby.
Okay.
I'm done. Marjorie wants me to shut up.
I do, because we're almost out of time here.
Appreciate
Coming up
it.
after the 1 o'clock news, NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey. You're welcome, Jim.
It's okay.
Explains the NAACP's name, image, license settlement, and a bunch of other sporting news. She's next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Trenni Casey is next.
Join GBH and wealth planning strategist Jerry Doyle for From Paperwork to Peace of Mind. Doyle will share his knowledge on all stages of estate planning, Wednesday, June 18th at our Brighton studios. Register online at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you and Newport Mansions, presenting Richard Morris Hunt in a New Light, a groundbreaking exhibition examining the architect's impact on American culture and his vision for a gilded American civilization. Tickets at newportmansions.org. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 3 of BPR, live from the Boston Public Library. Trenni Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston. Finally, a sports bar coming to Boston with exclusive focus on women's sports. We'll hear Trenni's take on the latest court settlement that will make some college athletes really rich, plus a Nobel Prize winner making the case that WNBA players are really underpaid.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll end our Tuesday with you, talking about new research on the brain benefits of singing, which apparently has the ability to calm and heal and make us less depressed. Big time. Who knew? Of course, the jury's still out on what hearing 26 years of a certain voice can do for one Brookline woman's well-being, but call or text us. Is singing the path to sanity in these troubling times? Do you sing in the car, the shower, the rain? Let us know next in the third hour. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump visits Fort Bragg in North Carolina today to celebrate the Army's 250th birthday. NPR's Tamara Keith reports Trump will address troops and their families at the base ahead of a parade in Washington, D.C. this weekend.
Trump's visit to the largest U.S. Army base by population also allows him to celebrate a campaign promise kept. The Biden administration had renamed the installation Fort Liberty, but Trump quickly had it changed back.
We win world wars from Fort Robert E. Lee, from Fort Bragg, from all the different forts. And what do? We change the name of the forts because we want to be politically correct. So a lot of them we're changing back. You probably noticed Fort Bragg and others. But I think it's a time to celebrate our military.
The massive military parade featuring tanks and flyovers is on Saturday, which is also Trump's birthday. But he insisted it isn't about him. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
But today, Trump is under heavy criticism for his decision to deploy troops in Los Angeles. At the White House moments ago, Trump again defended the deployments to counter protests over federal immigration detentions.
If we didn't get involved, right now, Los Angeles would be burning, just like it was burning a number of months ago with all the houses that were lost. Los Angeles right now would be on fire.
Los Angeles experienced a fourth straight night of confrontations between police and protesters. LA authorities are hoping things are calmer today. Steve Futterman reports so far, no problems.
The most recent confrontation with police again came after protesters refused orders to leave. But the number of protesters was smaller than previous nights. Police fired tear gas and rubber bullets. Protesters threw water bottles and fireworks. Law enforcement is still most concerned about the evening hours. The ICE arrests still have many people like Dennis Cox upset.
Attacking them is immoral. We're a country that's supposed to welcome strangers, not attack them.
Despite the protests, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has continued to carry out additional detainments in the L.A. area. At least 2 of its raids took place at Home Depots. For NPR News, I'm Steve Futterman in Los Angeles.
Critics accuse President Trump of manufacturing chaos with the deployments of members of the military. Gamers in Hong Kong could be accused of seditious activity if they download Reverse Front Bonfire. In the game, users role-play different ethnic groups or countries that historically have been oppressed by China. Hong Kong authorities say the game has seditious intent and is a national security threat. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Primary care doctors in the Massachusetts General Brigham system have voted to unionize, but they say the healthcare giant is trying to stop that union from getting certified. GBH's Marilyn Scherer has more.
88% of PCPs at Mass General Brigham who cast a ballot on unionization voted yes. But the healthcare system's management is asking the National Labor Relations Board to review the vote. They argue that to pass legal muster, the union would need to include all doctors working at MGB hospitals, not just primary care physicians. Mass General Brigham doctor Marjorie Rao argues the review request is not in good faith.
It's got to be something about how their corporation wants to maintain the type of power that they have over our working environments, not really because they want all of the doctors to be in a union.
In a statement, Mass General Brigham says it's committed to a, quote, fair, lawful process that supports both physicians and patients. Marilyn Scherer, GBH News.
U.S. Senator Ed Markey says he would fight Trump over the president's deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles. The State House News Service reports that days after President Trump deployed 2,000 National Guard troops in California, Ed Markey says he would oppose any similar tactics that were to happen here in Massachusetts. In sports, the Red Sox-Rays play Game 2 of their series tonight at Fenway. First pitch little after 7. And rain could be heavy at times today, high in the mid-60s. Don't forget the umbrella. Ella. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Council for Interior Design Qualification, whose certified designers work to protect occupants through the design of code-compliant and accessible environments. Learn more at cidq.org/NPR.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you, and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back here tomorrow and Friday. Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, will be with us June 17th from 1 to 2, and Governor Moore Healey, the governor of Massachusetts, obviously Marjorie, will be here from 11 to 12 on June 25th. Hello again, Jim.
You know why? That's why she's called Governor Healey.
That's
Do
right.
you know that?
That's right. Well, you know, I slipped up there a little bit, and you're always right there to point it out.
I
for
am.
me. Thank you very much.
I always like how I find out that I'm preempted when, like, in a promo. Like, oh, next week the mayor's here from 1 to 2. I guess I'm not here next week.
Well, apparently not. It's good you're paying attention. But you are here now. We're now joined at the library by Trenni Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston, and a BPR contributor. Hi, Trenni.
Hi, guys.
Hey
So Trenni, it was incredible that Jim explained he really didn't understand the details of this new way that college athletes are going to be paid. I thought that was an incredible admission on his part.
Thank you.
But we know there's going to be a new way that college athletes are going to be paid. So what do we know?
Okay, so I didn't understand it either. Jim and I were talking about this during the break, and I was like, I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand. However, thank you, Columbus Dispatch, who broke it down for the Ohio State fans of their sports teams. So here's what the settlement does. It requires, first of all, the NCAA is going to pay like $3 million, about $2.8 million in back pay to athletes for the last 10 years.
Wow.
It's for people who should have gotten NIL money who like lost out on it. So they sued because they were never able to
NIL is name,
and image and likeness. Okay. So, but that's a small amount. The real crux of this deal is that each school is going to now be able to directly pay athletes they'll have a pool of $20.5 million to direct pay athletes. They're also going to give more scholarships out. So, but they're going to limit roster size. So we'll work with football because this is, the article I read here explains it through the eyes of...
And the money comes from the school.
The money comes from the school.
Okay.
So like Ohio State, which is the example I'm going to use because it's the article I read that breaks it down for dummies. Ohio State is going to add this premium seating, field level seating that they're going to sell that is going to allow them to bring in more revenue. And their football team, which usually has a roster of 121 kids.
Wow.
Guys.
That's huge.
85 of which are on scholarship. That roster is going to be shrunk to 105 total athletes with 90 on scholarships. So they're going to get 5 more athletic scholarships, but fewer walk-ons, right? So they'll have a smaller roster, but more scholarships. Where this gets to be unfair, in my opinion, is, again, using Ohio State as the example, they have 36 varsity sports. 4 of them will most likely get the $20.5 million direct pay athletes. The brunt of those payouts will go to men's football. Well, there's only men's football, and men's basketball. They have not yet said which of the 2 other sports will be the recipients of these direct pay. So basically direct pay is, let's just say, we'll use Drake May as an example. We'll pretend that he's not the Patriots quarterback. We'll pretend that he's still in high school. And University of North Carolina wants him, and Ohio State wants him, and Wisconsin wants him. They can't offer him direct pay money in addition to his NIL money to try and get him to come to the school. So you now get into almost like a bidding war, but you also have to make sure that you have enough money to give maybe a running back that you want, or a wide receiver, or maybe a forward on the basketball team, or this really good point guard. So they now are having general managers, like Mike Lombardi went with Bill Belichick to the University of North Carolina to be a general manager to kind of handle a college football roster the way you would handle a pro roster. Who gets the money? How does it get doled out? And, and which players are worth what?
Charlie Baker runs the NCAA, our former governor. Did he think this was a good idea?
Stability is the term he used. I don't know what that means.
I'm going to be honest. I would love to talk to him about it. I don't know what he means by stability, because also in this article, it talks about, you've got 36 varsity sports, 4 are going to get money, and right away we know 2 of those 4 are going to be men's sports. So is the other one going to be women's volleyball if they have a good, what's the next? Is it women's soccer? What's the next highest grossing? They're giving the money to the highest grossing sports. But because of Title IX and rollbacks on DEI programs and Title IX, schools are no longer required to basically make things equal for men's and women's sports. So if they want, and I suppose women could sue for this, but I don't know, honestly, I don't know if they would win in this environment. If Ohio State decides that men's soccer, men's wrestling, men's basketball, and men's football are the 4 highest grossing sports, and that's where they want to put their money, I think technically they are allowed
Well,
to.
there's another flaw. Wait, there's another huge flaw in this.
I mean, there's
it's
a
beyond
lot
the
of
one.
flaws.
And again, we're going to have to all study this so we understand it better. Here's one thing I do understand. Of the $20.8 million, I think that's what they're allowed to spend.
$20.5 million.
20.5. I read a story this morning that University of Michigan is planning on giving its quarterback $12 million. Yeah. That's one player on one team, which leaves a total of $8.5 million to give to anybody else. That's one. Number two.
Hold on. Can I ask you a question off that?
Yeah.
If the $12 million quarterback comes to that school but decides he wants to leave after his sophomore year,
then I suppose that money goes back. I suppose if you fulfill it's similar to any contract, right? Let's say I sign a contract to play for the Connecticut Sun, and I play for them for the 2 years. It's not like all of a sudden if I demand a trade.
You're making it sound like the 12 million, because I don't know if you may be right. 12 million is to come to the school. 12 million may be your freshman year payment.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That might be your freshman year payment. I don't know if that's over the course of the 4 years.
Because they can all switch.
I don't
They can
know
all
if it's
switch
the course
teams
of
now,
one.
But the thing, how is
my
it?
Guess,
by the way,
my guess is you sign a contract like you would in any other sport where they probably, again, I don't know if they take that because it's 12. They get $20.5 million per year to spend on athletes. So I don't know. Is this quarterback in Michigan getting $12 million
every year? He's there. I don't know.
Or is he signing a quote unquote $12 million contract, which would be $3 million over the course of 4 years?
Okay, we should leave this in a second because we got to learn more. But two things. One, I think it's fair that athletes in at least the major sports that do essentially make money for the university share in the wealth. Having said that, there is an inequity when so much goes. And the third and final thing, how is this person not a professional? If you're making $12 million, Cooper Flagg, the kid from Maine, who was playing 1 year at Duke, made $28 million in names, image, and likeness.
That includes endorsements, right? So
whatever it does.
So you still get to...
So he's a professional athlete who happens to be a freshman at Duke.
Yeah.
So why the fiction? I mean,
Jim, it's
okay.
You know how I feel about college sports. I think it has been an abyss and a joke for years. And listen, I went to Marquette. I love Marquette college basketball, but I refuse when you get those things in the mail. Now, I think I've talked about this on the show before. When I get something in the mail that says, the class of 1999 is trying to raise X amount of dollars in their name for, scholarships and this, and you can check NIL. You can check a box where you're giving money to some kid to come play there. I refuse. I won't do it. I will never give to the athletic department. To me, it is what has ruined our educational system here and made it monetized and not a meritocracy. In other countries, this does not happen. All sports are club sports. You're not giving scholarships. You're not giving preferential treatment because you're a good athlete and not a good student. We have made sports in this country more important than education.
Right. A kid can be a dope, I should say. May or may not be, but the kid could be a dope.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I made money in college writing papers for basketball players.
Did you really?
Yeah. Because they were kind of dummies. A lot of them were dummies.
Beautifully put.
And they couldn't, and so they would need help. And I'm sure they were getting money from somewhere. I'm a poor college kid. It wasn't a lot. It was like I was extorting these guys. But yeah, I'd be like $20, $50.
Good
I'll
for
help you
you.
write your paper.
That's very nice to hear. Can we go to the other side of
Gotta hustle, Jim. My parents didn't put me through college. I paid my own way.
Good for you. This great Claudia Golden, she's a professor at Harvard. People may remember she won the Nobel Prize in economic science. She talks about the differential between what NBA players get and WNBA players get.
So I loved this column, and props to Zoe for finding it because we've often had equal pay conversations on this program, right? Is what should the WNBA get paid versus what players in the NBA get paid? And a lot of people just say, well, the salary should be equal. They should all be the same. But that's not reality, right? Because the NBA does bring in more money than the WNBA, and you have to scale every league scales their salaries and scales their salary caps based on total revenue. But this article actually, for the first time, it's the first one I've ever seen like this, that it actually breaks down in numbers the discrepancy in pay, but also in what they should be paid. So right now, WNBA players are paid 1/80th of the average NBA player. When Claudine broke down the numbers based on television revenue.
Well, we should, before you leave that, 1/80th is 125,000 average versus 10 million average. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. It's like 125,000 to like 10 million, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
And what she did is she looked and said, okay, well, what would be equal in terms of ticket sales, merchandise, and broadcast revenue? And she found that what would be more equitable would be 1/3 to 1/4. So it wouldn't be 1-to-1. She's not saying that if an NBA player, a rookie NBA player gets paid $10 million, then a rookie WNBA player should be paid $10 million. But if a rookie NBA player is getting a contract for $10 million per year, she's arguing that at the very least, a quarter of that would be like
2.5 million, right?
Like between 2.5 and $3 million. That would be equal based on what they're bringing in. And so what I was curious, what wasn't in this, I don't think I saw it in the article, but when I was thinking about this story this morning, I was like, the WNBA's CBA, their collective bargaining agreement, is coming up. It actually expires this October 2025. So when their season is finished. I'm curious how much this column plays a part in because they now can renegotiate their contract, and they have much more leverage, the WNBA does, than they have ever had before to collectively bargain something that is more financially beneficial to them, especially because it is this October that new television rights deal starts. So when the NBA, which is partially, they kind of co-own the WNBA, there's a partnership there. They recently negotiated in full disclosure, NBC is one of their new one of their new broadcast partners. Yeah. Big NBC is. It's a $77 billion with a B dollar broadcast rights deal for both the NBA and the WNBA. So that is a lot of money coming into these teams that should be more fairly distributed between both the men and the women.
Yeah, everybody, was it in the New York Times? Is that where this is?
I think it was in New York Times.
People should check this out. If you just look up, Claudia Golden is her name, Goldin.
Yeah.
And it's
what I liked about it,
done.
It wasn't just screaming from the
rooftops.
Rhetoric. It's just plain and simple numbers and math, which I am terrible at, and I was very grateful to her for breaking it down. So now that when people have the conversation, again, instead of saying, well, if Cooper Flagg gets this, why doesn't Paige Beckers get this? Well, Paige Beckers should get about a quarter to a third of what Cooper Flagg gets based on the hard numbers that she has put together, which would still be equal pay.
Okay, let's get to Alex Cooper. People may know her from the Call Her Daddy podcast. She interviewed Kamala Harris and a bunch of other, Katy Perry, a bunch of other famous people. She has charged her coach when she was a Division I athlete at Boston University with sexual harassment.
We have sound. Should we play the sound first?
Yes, let's play the
There's
sound.
a docu-series out on Hulu. It's called Call Her Alex. And here she is, as Marjorie said, accusing BU soccer coach at the time, Nancy Feldman, of sexual harassment during her college years.
My freshman year, I had just kind of like a normal relationship with my coach. So when my coach started to pay extra attention to me, I figured it was probably because I was playing well. It was this psychotic game of, you want to play? Tell me about your sex life. I have to drive you to your night class. Get in the car with me alone. My parents and I sit down with the dean of athletics, and my mom and dad say, our daughter has been
getting sexually harassed by Nancy Feldman for the past 3 years on this campus. The sound is cut off, and in the story about this says basically the athletic director had no interest in hearing any of this. And by the way, before Trenni comments on this, we're talking about money a minute ago. If you don't know who Alex Cooper is, she is huge. After Joe Rogan, she's making like $40 million a year.
Yeah, I think
the podcast is huge.
Yeah, she's really talented.
She's talented. So
very smart.
What do you make of this story?
I mean, listen, a lot of people, and of course, right away, I stupidly always read the comments about this story. And, it's why is it coming out now? She just wasn't a good player. Look at her stats. That's why she didn't play. But just because you don't play does not negate the fact that someone tried to manipulate you and use you as a young person. And what struck me is that her mother had notes. She was open and talking with her parents about what was going on. Right. And her mother had detailed descriptions of everything Alex had talked to her about. Now, the reason she said she came out now to talk about this is because she said it's still going on. It truthfully cannot still be going on because Nancy Feldman has not been a part of Boston University's athletic culture since 2022. She is done. She is retired. But that doesn't mean that what she meant to say was that it continued on long after I left. I am curious to see, and I haven't seen today that there's been any more fallout, anyone else coming forward. I feel like, unfortunately, the world that we live in, if it's one person, it's very easy to dismiss it, as in this case, she said. But the minute you have an avalanche of other people coming out with similar stories, that often causes a reckoning at a school. But maybe because of Alex Cooper's platform, maybe this does take on a life of its own, and I wonder what the repercussions will be at Boston University.
I just want to say something, because the why is she coming out now thing drives me so insane. People who ask that question should do a little research. Look at the priests. We've got kids 6, 7, and 8. They were 50 or 55. The kids at the prep schools and the high schools. All these stories about sexual abuse or even rape of kids. Takes them decades.
Well, and I would say,
so get with the program.
It's not just coming out now. She tried to talk about it in the thick of it with her mother and her father, 2 adults in the room, and all 3 of them were told, not enough. That team's doing pretty. Again, this is my biggest issue with amateur sports, is that we put so much emphasis on winning and like the culture around these sports that we don't care about the athletes. We see it happen over and over and over again.
Right. But it's very difficult to come out and make these accusations, because often it's against someone who's very powerful, very popular, maybe very charismatic. You feel like you won't be believed. So anyway,
how does she benefit from making up the story too?
She's loaded. People say the same thing. Donald Trump. Oh, these women just wanted to make money selling books. Oh, these women just wanted to get notorious. Oh, these children just wanted to make money off the Catholic Church. People always bring it back to some alternative motive.
Well, a court has spoken in the case of Donald Trump, even though the American people are fine with a sexual abuser being their president. Can I make one more comment on the story, because it relates to what I usually say about politicians? I don't know if this is happening all over the country. I think it is, but it's really horrible here. One of the things our legislature does when they have done something underhanded is they refuse to respond to requests for comment by the Globe, by GBH, by NBC, by whomever. Right. My default is, I know this sounds extreme, if a public or quasi-public figure is accused of something serious and chooses to say nothing, the default should be guilty as charged until they speak. And the reason I bring this up, these are really serious charges. The athletic department refuses to talk to the Globe. The athletic director refuses to talk to the Globe.
And it is still the same athletic director, I believe, right?
He's been there since 2014. His name is Drew Maricello. He has been BU's athletic director since 2014. A call to his office redirected to the BU school-wide voicemail system. When there is, and I consider BU a quasi-public entity, obviously, when serious allegations like this are made, like they're often made about people on Beacon Hill, you have an obligation to respond. And if you don't, people should feel free to draw the worst conclusions.
Honestly, even if you don't answer that first call and you get together with your PR team or your legal team,
exactly right.
You have there is an opportunity there for you to figure out, if you've done nothing wrong, to figure out how to talk about it. And they chose not to.
Well, she got this documentary on Hulu, which I think is going to get a lot of play and attention.
Have you listened to her, by the way? She is really talented.
She's great. Listen to her whole Kamala Harris interview.
Oh, right. That's where
and I thought to myself, Kamala Harris should have gone on to Joe Rogan and Theo Von and these other places too. But she's very, very talented. Call Her Daddy, excuse me, is the name of the podcast.
How many women podcasters are in the top 10 or 20 superstars?
I think Kylie Kelsey, just by virtue of being Jason Kelsey's wife, not to say that she's not talented in her own right, but that she's huge.
Big.
Like, I think also she's Taylor and Travis, adjacent, which boosts anybody's curating these days.
Kara Swisher, I think, has got a pretty good podcast.
She is a genius too.
Yeah, she's used to be a big friend of Elon Musk. Let's end on a happy note here, because I think this is kind of cool. This sports bar that's coming to Boston.
Yes.
We were one of the cities chosen. That's only going to play women's sports.
Well, it's called the Sports Bra, and it's funny because last week on the this very program, we talked about how there's been this explosion of women's-specific sports bars opening across the country. They're in LA, and Seattle, and Portland, and Chicago, and New York City. And I was like, why doesn't Boston have one? And I am not kidding you. I sat down at my desk at work at like 2:15 after being on this program at 1 p.m. And like 10 minutes before I had sat down, the Globe published a story that the sports bra is coming to Boston, that they've chosen, that they wanted to see how their pilot bar. So the sports bra is just a sports bar. But it's a sports bar that emphasizes women's sports over men's sports.
On the TVs.
On the TVs. And I think also in the paraphernalia and everything. Not the clientele. Men are allowed to go. It's not a women-only bar. Everyone is welcome. But they wanted to make sure that it worked in Portland, which is a hotbed of, they've just got a really great women's soccer. They've got just great women's sports, I think, out in the Pacific Northwest. And they have chosen, it's like St. Louis, Boston, and I forget the third city. There's 3 cities they're going to expand to, but it's going to be right here in Boston. I believe it'll open in 2026, which is
a pretty big
awesome.
deal.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
Can I just add something that has nothing to do with Trenni, except she's a concerned citizen? I've just seen numbers pop up, speaking of something on your computer. Sending the military to Los Angeles, someone testifying with Pete Hegseth today before a House committee said it's going to cost a minimum of $134 million. Troops that are inflaming the situation that neither the governor or the mayor want. The parade...
Probably the Marines don't want it either.
The parade is going to cost anywhere from $45 to $100 million over the weekend. That's $250 million at a time when lots of things we all care about, hopefully including NPR you care about, and PBS, and food stamps, and healthcare are being cut. $250 million for a parade and sending troops where the officials didn't want them.
Does that include fixing the roads after the parade is over?
No, and there was this incredible thing I heard last night where there was some Republican senator saying, "Don't worry, the Army will pay for it." And the host, I don't know what I was watching,
they understand where the Army gets their money
exactly,
from, right?
The Army gets their money from us. We're going to pay to fix the damn roads.
Like, what do they think? There's the Army sponsored by Duncan?
That's exactly. Runs on Duncan.
It's just unbelievable.
Trenni, before you go, our topic, there's a story in the Washington Post, how singing, by yourself or even more, singing with others, even if you're no good at it, is incredibly good for your brain and your health.
Oh, I love to car sing.
You do car sing,
yeah,
okay.
like if I'm stuck in traffic and you see me, I will definitely be belting out. Oftentimes, like Taylor Swift, All Too Well, the 10-minute version.
I love that song.
I can play it over and over and over again, and it just releases like this endorphin. It's like
that's exactly what they say.
Have you done karaoke?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm terrible. I can't sing for a lick, and
you don't need to be good, they say. It's irrelevant.
Well, of course I don't. I'm in my car by myself.
Nice to see you, Trenni Casey. Thank you so much.
I will see you next week at 12:30.
That's right. That's right.
No, actually, we just called the mayor to see if she could preempt you. She said she'll be here. So,
okay.
See ya.
Okay.
Not true. Goodbye.
Trenni, thank you so much. We've been speaking with Trenni Casey, anchor reporter for NBC Sports Boston and a Boston Public Radio contributor, and we're so glad she is. Coming up after a quick break, as we just alluded to, we are singing in the rain with all the pessimism out there, however justified. We need a break from the doom and gloom. This is our break from the doom and gloom half hour, Jim. A new study shows that singing, no matter your talent level, is very good for your brain and for your mood and for warding off the terrible things that happen to your brain as you age. It actually boosts cognitive function as well. Do you sing in the car, the shower, the rain? Well, take your calls about all the ways you belt out of tune. That's next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, reaction from local veterans about the Trump administration's deployment of National Guard troops and Marines to Los Angeles. Primary care doctors in the Mass General Brigham system claim that management is trying to stymie union efforts. And as climate change drives rising sea levels, millions of Americans are finding themselves in potential flood zones. It's all starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And American Repertory Theater, with the hit musical rom-com Two Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York. The Boston Globe calls it clever, funny, and delightfully surprising. Now playing. amrep.org.
Research, not crackpot stuff, that singing, regardless of your talent level, boosts health in many ways. It soothes the mind, brings people together, and is scientifically proven to promote brain health. So to end the show today, the lines are open. What are your thoughts about belting out your favorite tunes in the car, as Trenni does, in the shower, at karaoke night, alone, with friends, on the radio? It doesn't matter. Give us a call. Tell us what singing, what making music of a sort does for you. And depending how good or bad you are, you might make it into our next Am I the A-hole segment. Am I the A-hole for singing loudly at the office and on the radio? You don't need to sing. We'll encourage you to sing a bar or two, but we're welcome. 877-301-8970. Let me just say, I didn't explain this as accurately as I should.
Yep.
According to this research, as a reporter on the Washington Post, even listening to music is a boost to your brain health.
Right.
The next best thing is singing alone. The better thing than just listening or singing alone is singing with others. It decreases cortisol, which I've never heard of, which is a stress hormone, and increases other good hormones. And as we said a second ago, and as we said to Trenni, you don't need to be good. The mere fact of singing, listening to music, particularly singing with others, is a great thing for your brain and your overall health.
You know
Why
what?
do you think?
I never knew this at all until we got this story
Nor
today.
I.
And they also talked about how it helps you as you age. One study of 132 older adults reported that 6 months of piano practice or just active music listening led to increases in gray matter and improvements in auditory working memory or short-term memory of sounds. Practicing the piano for years is associated with improved cognitive flexibility. So that's something, especially if you're retired and you're older, for your brain health. I had no idea.
Nor did I.
And this whole thing about joining a choir, I guess we should all go out and become a cappella singers, but how great it is. And even something as simple as tapping along to the same beat with another person makes us feel closer to them than if we tap out of beat.
Do you listen to music while you're preparing? We both read some of the material for the next day's show the night before. Do you listen to music while you're doing it?
No, never.
I do.
You do?
I do. And
what do
the
you
key,
listen to?
which actually I did know even before I read
lyrics?
this, I was just going to say
Yeah.
that. If you listen to lyrics, it screws you up.
Yeah.
If you listen to music without, people singing, it fades into the background. I had no idea that it was helpful. I mean, it helped me. It's sort of soothing. I had no idea it was actually good for you in a health kind of way, but apparently that is too. Dean Ashland texts and says, well, singing may be good for me. It's not so good for those who may hear me. Have you ever done? I would rather be waterboarded than do karaoke.
No, I've never done karaoke. No, I've not. But I can't sing very well. I can mostly.
Most people do karaoke can't sing very well either.
They can't. But that's a little. That I would have to have had a couple of margaritas, I think, before I get up there.
You've never had a couple of margaritas,
never,
have you? I don't think so.
Never.
877-301-8970. Do you buy this? You may even know this already, that singing is good for your health. Particularly with others, as I said.
Well, I know a couple of people who sing in choirs, and they talk about how much they love it. And, one of my kids has got a really good voice and sang in those a cappella groups in college.
She can really sing. You've played me tapes of her.
Yeah, she's a good singer. And she absolutely, it's a big part of her life. So I guess I should have known this already, but I didn't. Harry from Quincy, what do you think, Harry?
Hello, Harry.
Hi, guys. I actually am a member of the Quincy Choral Society, so I sing in the chorus on a very regular basis.
And?
The benefits are community. It's another community that you can be involved in.
Yeah.
And my master's of counseling psychology, and I always advocate having this other thing beyond your work and your home. So it's the third thing where you go and you learn something new and you commune with some other people who are on the same wavelength as you, and you make some beautiful music. It's completely beneficial in every single way. And brain scans show that it fires up your brain in ways that are super beneficial just for your mental health.
So does it work for you? It obviously does. I can tell from just the way you're talking, right?
Absolutely. I leave there and my shoulders are down. The weight of the world and all of its problems are not on my shoulders anymore. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing for all levels of singers, too.
So sing us a bar or two there, Harry.
Oh, okay. How about some Italian?
Sure.
Good.
Una furtiva lagrima negli occhi suoi spuntò.
Wow.
That was beautiful. Harry, we really appreciate your call. That was great. And your singing's pretty great. So, Jamie, did you understand what he was saying? You speak fluent Italian. What are you talking about?
He didn't understand it.
What? Okay.
Okay.
So here, wait a second.
Jim, you have been caught red-handed. When the studio at the Boston Public Library
excuse me. Mark
plays
is leaving out the
classical
first part of
music
this
in the morning.
note. No. First part of the note says, Aiden, Marjorie's staff person,
That's right.
notes that Jim is full of it.
And Aiden is correct.
When the studio at the BPL is playing classical music in the morning, while I'm prepping, he regularly complains about
right.
it. Can someone turn that blank off?
You do.
Yeah, well, maybe I do. Okay. Maybe I do. I'm not perfect.
Jim it creates a picture. He's home in his study.
I don't have a
study.
Reading, I don't have a study.
Well, wherever you are.
I sit in a chair in my house.
You sit in your chair, and you got, Bach cantatas on the background.
I
but
do.
Apparently that's not really what's going on, Jim.
Yeah. I tell the people in my house, shut that stuff. No. By the way, it's in the morning. In the morning, I'm usually in a bad mood, as you know.
He sits
That's the
in
only...
his chair, rage texting Jamie and Marjorie.
Well, that is also true. That I find rage texting is actually very soothing for me cognitively as well. It may not be great for the recipients, but it's really good for me.
Okay.
I'm a high school teacher. It says C from Waltham. I'm a high school teacher. Each year on the night of graduation, my coworkers and I have a karaoke and beverage night. Best way to end the school year.
Well, it is fun. I mean, I've been to one and watched other people do karaoke. I mean, it's a riot. Everybody's up there, and some of them are terrible, and some of them are good, and some of them are good dancers, and some of them are totally awkward. It's fun. It's just a fun kind of...
So why, if it's
maybe
fun...
we should do that. Maybe our BPR staff should go out and do some karaoke at a bar.
Can anybody sing on this staff, or no? Can anybody sing?
No. None of us can sing.
Okay, fine.
Bill from Newton, thank you for calling.
Hello, Bill.
Well, thank you.
Hi.
Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you, we think. Go ahead.
I love you guys.
Thank you.
All the time helping my wife.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, what's up?
I'm happy to sing. I'm half Irish, half Italian.
Yeah.
And I wanted to sing a little of my favorite song that I actually sang in Ireland when my son and I went over with my cousin.
Oh, well,
we're ready.
Go to it. What's the song?
Oh, Danny boy.
That's the song.
The pipes are cold.
Oops.
From glen to glen and down the side.
We're losing you, Bill.
Summer's o'er and all the flowers die. 'Tis you must go with time.
Bill, we have to stop you only because you're breaking up.
You're breaking up.
Bill, how happy does that make you doing that? What does it do for you?
I sing every day, all day long. I'm the oldest of 8 kids from the Bronx, New York. I live in Newton, and my mother was a singer. Singing makes me as pure.
Yeah.
We gotta let you go. It obviously makes him very happy.
Cutting out. I don't mean.
Thank you,
Danny
Bill. That was
Boy is a
beautiful.
great song, and Bill did it beautifully. But I must say, there's not an Irish funeral that I've been to where you don't hear "Oh
So
Danny
what?
Boy."
What do you
well,
care?
there reminds me of funerals. Everybody sings "Oh Danny Boy" at the end of the funeral, and everybody cries.
Okay, well, that's a negative attitude. This is actually pretty great. Anonymous texter, my wife is a professional singer with MS. Singing has helped slow down physical, this is amazing, slow down physical and mental decline due to damage from the disease. Is that incredible?
That is incredible. And remember Tony Bennett, who sang, he died, he was very old.
In his 90s.
He was 90s. But and he gave that performance with Lady Gaga. And one of the things they talked about, because I'm not sure if he had dementia or if he had Alzheimer's or something, but they were talking about around that special how he remembered all the words to his songs, even though he was suffering from some significant cognitive decline. He'd get up there and belted out those songs with Lady Gaga. Remember that?
How come we didn't know this earlier? I mean, this is a fairly...
I'm very happy. I learned something today that is useful besides having to learn about, tanks in Los Angeles.
Here's Courtney from Holden.
Insurrectionists
Listen
and
to
stuff.
this one. My 3 girls and I have been belting out tunes in the car since they were babies. They're now 11, 9, and 9. Well, 9 and 9. Okay. I tell them to sing loud and proud. I don't want them to be afraid of their voices. Now this is great. They request individual rides with me to play DJ and sing for a little mental health break. That's really
great.
Fabulous.
That's great. That's great. Ben in puberty doesn't get that far. When I start to sing, my wife immediately shuts me down. Happy wife, happy life. So I only sing by myself in
Do you
the
sing
car.
in the shower?
No.
I don't think I've ever sung in the shower. What is it? Why do people sing in the shower?
I don't know. My daughter sings in the shower.
She does?
Yeah.
Why does she sing in the shower?
I don't know, but that's why I said, wow.
Oh, Aiden just said good acoustics.
Maybe that's it. When she was a little girl, I'd hear her sing. I think, geez, that's
You know
pretty
that friend of the show who we love, Will Daly? During COVID, he did concerts on Zoom from the shower in his house. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Stephen Weymouth, welcome to the show. Hi. Steve. Hi.
I think it's Steve from Wayland.
Oh, Wayland.
Yeah.
Sorry, my mistake. Welcome to the show, Steve. Hi.
That's okay. I got to tell you guys, I agree with you guys most of the time, but I have to say I can't agree with you more on this one. Hold on, let me get off the speakerphone. Sorry. I can't agree with you more. I host, for the last 14 years, I've hosted open mics in the area.
Oh.
And we have more fun getting up there. Usually an individual will get up, a soloist will start singing, and then you may have some friend join up and start singing harmonies, and then the whole place starts singing along. And you never really know what to expect, but it's just a real joy to be able to sing, to play, and also give that opportunity to a lot of other people.
Hey, Steve, if you host these open mics, I don't mean this facetiously, for someone who is willing to sing publicly in front of other people who's not very good, do they have to be drunk or under the influence, or do people just not care?
Nope, I think people care that we get all kinds of talent, and we get beginners, and everybody knows you're starting out, and it's supportive. It's a totally supportive crowd. It's the best place to get started.
Great. That's fabulous. Where do you do this, Steve?
I do them out in Metro West. I have a Facebook page that shows where they are. But
you can tell us what it is if you want. It's fine. What is it?
Okay. Well, it's called Open Mics, and that's MICS. Open Mics West.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Check it out, everybody.
4 different ones going right now.
Great.
Wow.
Steve, thanks for the
It does
call.
sound like fun. Look what Natalie watching on
What'd she
YouTube
say?
said. I don't sing because I'm happy. I'm happy because I sing.
Listen to the next one. Anonymous texter, like the Tony Bennett story. My Alzheimer's racked mother couldn't remember my name, but she would sing folk songs all day long. Helped us both toward her end. That's actually pretty beautiful. And this is from Robert in D.C. Making music connects all different parts of your brain, including the part with a worm living in it. It's Robert.
Yeah,
in DC.
The guy with the worm in his head is the one that's telling us all we shouldn't be getting vaccines. This is Nate in Worcester. I'm constantly doing yard work with my earbuds and belting out my favorite songs. My neighbor says I'm no good, but I don't care because it's fun. Plus, it scored me a Pearl Jam ticket to Fenway, and my other neighbor, who had an extra ticket, realized that they were one of my favorite bands from hearing him singing in the yard.
Yeah. So let me ask you, I told you the 3 levels from this Washington Post story. The least beneficial is listening to music. The next more beneficial, if that's proper English, is singing by yourself. The most beneficial is singing with others. In light of the fact that doesn't almost everybody on the planet listen to music during the day? Why are we not all healthier? How many people in the audience listen to music at some point during the day? Can you raise your hand?
No, that's
only about half. Well, it's only about half.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think I listen to too many podcasts.
You do?
I do, yeah. Well, I feel like I have to know things for work, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I go home and I watch old Greater Boston, so I was the host of.
Say, those were the days.
Now, one of my coworkers, and a really nasty, to quote Donald Trump, a really nasty note, said, Jim, I think your hot dog consumption cancels it all out, which it may do. Remember the study we've mentioned a million times out of the University of Michigan. Every hot dog you consume shortens your life. I think it's 31 minutes or something like that. Oh, that's from Aiden, Marjorie's staff person.
Oh, okay.
David in Exeter, New Hampshire. We're talking about how singing is good for your health. Welcome to the show. Hi.
My wild Irish rose, the sweetest flower that grows.
Wow.
Well, keep going.
Wow. But none can compare to my wild Irish rose.
Not bad, David from Exeter, New Hampshire. That was great.
It's unfortunate that we only have Irish people listening to the show today, but go ahead.
That's true. Yeah,
go ahead, David.
It's the best music,
no
Jim.
Austrians listening right
Yeah.
now.
Go ahead, David.
Hey, listen, I'm the. I just wanted to mention that I sing with a barbershop quartet.
Ah.
And when we hit certain chords, we call it ringing a chord. And it's.
Yeah.
And we do this little thing where we kind of wink at each other, and we put our hands on the back of our neck, which is supposed to symbolize the hair rising off the back of our neck because it sounds so good.
What's the name of your barbershop quartet?
Oh, I've been involved with many of them, but the last one was called Time After Time.
Time After Time.
That's a good name.
Time After Time.
That's it?
David.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I want to know, how much happier are you, or how much healthier do you feel after one of your bouts was singing there, David?
Well, like I said, when you ring a chord and you get this euphoric feeling and the hair stands up on the back of your neck.
That's pretty good, yeah.
It is very close to sexual gratification.
Well,
Wow,
there you go. Now people are listening.
Okay.
David, thank you. A lot of people started singing about 2 seconds ago.
Maybe
David, thanks.
you can take up an instrument and give up the Q-tips.
Oh, that's funny. We haven't done a Q-tip show in like a year or two. We're going to do that soon.
Here's Heather in Medford. I play violin with the Cambridge Symphony. Playing music with a large group of people can be a moving experience. All the people portraying the same musical emotion. On Saturday night, we are doing our last concert of the season at MIT with the ballet Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, which, of course, as she points out, is about fascism. So, yeah, coping with fascism.
You know, I'm going to quote our late, great colleague, Brian O'Donovan, and his great line, live music is where it's at. We were both, as you mentioned yesterday, at the 30th anniversary concert.
How great was it?
For Keith Lockhart. Now, being in the presence of how many people on the stage kind of the Tanglewood Chorus? 100?
Maybe 150?
Whatever. It was huge. There was, I mean, that was really practically a transformative
your mood
experience.
is through the roof.
Yeah.
Listen to that. And how many times have we talked about? We've talked about it with Keith Lockhart. We've been lucky enough to talk about it with Andres Nelson. How it's a
soothing,
mystical kind of thing for these guys. It's a. I mean, I guess that's why there's a lot of singing in churches. Episcopalians do a nice job. Sometimes the Catholics don't do it so well.
Singing in the Catholic Church is really
there are exceptions.
Something to be
there are
desired.
exceptions. John Mooney over there at St.
Cecilia's,
and my church, St. Ignatius, in Chestnut Hill at Boston College. Great music.
Really?
Changes everything.
Okay,
Changes everything.
Bridget, you're in Somerville. We're talking about this study that says, well, apparently a lot of you knew, singing is good for your health. Welcome, Bridget.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Of course.
I teach human evolution courses, so it doesn't surprise me so much on the findings. But just as a personal note, I've always been such a horrible singer, like astonishingly bad, that even in third grade, they wouldn't let me in the voice class.
Oh, because you're off key, Bridget?
Now,
you can't stay on key? Yeah, that's hard.
But now I have a little baby, and she thinks I'm the greatest singer in the world when I'm singing Wheels on the Bus or Old MacDonald, so I'm getting a lot of joy from that.
Bridget, will you do us a favor? Because I used to sing that song to my kids too. The Wheels on the Bus. Can you do a little for us?
Round and round.
Come on, Bridget.
Oh, sure.
Go ahead.
The wheels on the bus go round and round, round and round. And we particularly like the chorus, the babies on the bus go wah, 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 wah.
That was fabulous, Bridget.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that with us.
Parents
Thanks
on the
for
bus
the call.
go shh, shh, shh.
I know.
Shh, shh. Remember
That's
that
very
one?
good, Marty.
You know, Hillary Clinton
Thanks.
was tone deaf.
She is?
Yeah, she's tone deaf. Because if you're tone deaf and you sit and you sing, everyone can hear you because you're tone deaf.
My daughter told me a story of riding in a car with her best friend like 10 years ago.
Tone deaf.
And the friend is tone deaf. She's singing at the top of her lungs.
Yeah.
And the woman who's driving the car turns to her friend who's singing, who's tone deaf, and says, "You ever heard the so-and-so version of this song?" And the kid says, "Yes." She says, "Let's stay with that." So,
well, it's hard because I think when you're tone deaf, you don't realize how bad.
Do you not realize when you're tone deaf?
Well, you just heard that woman singing. She wasn't.
Bridget.
She couldn't stay on key.
Well, that's not really nice.
No, she said she couldn't stay on key.
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing her. She was admitting she couldn't stay on key.
No, but she knows it. So you're saying tone deaf people don't know they're tone deaf?
I think they do know they're tone deaf, but sometimes they just want to sing like everybody else, and
well,
they
they
realize
should be allowed to sing.
Okay,
maybe not. Let's go to Christine. You're in Salisbury. We're talking about singing and your health. Welcome to the show. Hello.
Thanks, guys. I love this topic.
Good.
Music is a huge part of my everyday life. I am a worship leader at a church.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a preschool teacher. And as somebody who's struggled with mental health issues my whole life, music has been the biggest healing part of this journey.
That's great.
And also physically, when I sing at church, I get the best sleep I've ever had in my life.
Really?
Why do you think that is, Christine?
Oh,
you don't know what it does? Okay.
I think it has to do with the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you let it out and you're also worshiping with people at church, there's this camaraderie that happens. And I have to nap every day I get home from church.
That's pretty great. Well, as you heard me say, the study that we've been referencing that inspired this conversation, there was reported on the Washington Post on the hierarchy of benefits from singing. It's singing with others, and you're doing it with fellow worshipers or whoever it is, and obviously it's working for you great. That was a great call, Christine. Thanks for making it.
Well, on the same lines, Chris from Boston says, been singing since professionally. I'm now 65, but people think I'm in my 40s, and I attribute that to the singing, the vibrations and the facial movements and the deep breathing. Certainly not good living, he says. And listen to this. I am 90, and so many times when I hear a special song, I think how lucky I am to be able to hear it. It immediately makes me feel good. Hearing it sing in the rain, maybe immediately think of Gene Kelly dancing in the rain. And there are many times when something cues me to sing. In the summer in the Vineyard, we have a community sing every Wednesday night, and apparently, obviously, people go there to sing.
Here's an interesting.
Pretty cool.
We've said repeatedly the study says it's good for your health. An anonymous texter says, does this mean I could have used my HSA to buy my Taylor Swift Eras tour tickets? The answer is yes. Why don't you try to do that and see how it goes. 877-301-8970.
Here's someone who's telling us about something called Choir, a Canadian group.
I don't know what that is.
2 guys and several hundred people singing for 2 hours. Themes like Queen, Journey, and Leonard Cohen, and Alleluia.
Well, don't they have those things you see on YouTube where like thousands of people get together and do whatever? They dance, they sing.
Yeah.
You've seen those. Those are really moving,
Yeah,
by the way.
they are.
Like in a train station or a plaza. You ever done that?
No. I've seen them.
You've seen them?
Yes, I've seen them, but I've kind
Okay,
of forgotten
fine.
about them. Okay, do we have anybody else?
Yeah,
Let's
we
go
have
to-
tons of people.
we have
Where
tons
do you
of
want us
people.
to go?
I can read some emails in the meantime.
Read emails or texts, they're called.
Guy Carwin and Pete Seeger helped the civil rights movement when we shall overcome, knowing how many groups sing brings people together. And
Well, that's totally true.
Yeah.
Totally true. Nancy in Concord, you're next. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
In the 1960s, Malden High School had a choral group named Choral Art. Our director was only a few years older than we. It was his first job. And we have been singing together ever since and giving concerts for 50 years.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
How great is that?
That's great.
How many of the original people who were singing in the 60s are still together?
Well, we all are, those of us who have survived. And as luck would have it, one of our bases ended up being the chief of police in Malden.
Oh, that's pretty
so
great.
People say, where did you sing? It was pretty much anywhere we wanted to.
That's a good one, Nancy. Thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate it.
Here's an anonymous, I think. It started out harmonizing for me with the Everly Brothers and CSNY, then the Beatles. Now
Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young?
When I moved back, yeah, that's right. When I moved back from California, the first thing I did was join the choir at First Baptist Church in Concord. It brings joy and connection to what I consider the divine choral music, like Eric Whitaker. Never heard of him, have you?
Nor have I.
Is celestial.
You know, a lot of people you and I know, and don't ask me for names because I don't know if they want, are in choruses. I didn't think about that. Just like normal people we know I'll tell you after the show. But yeah.
I know some people that are in choruses
Yeah,
too.
I know, and it brings them a lot of joy.
Yeah.
So none of this should have been surprising to us,
No, and you ever go? I mean, I love a cappella groups.
Oh, so do I.
They're kind of the best when you hear them doing all those great harmonies. I absolutely love harmonies. Look at Paul Simon. They did all those great harmonies years ago. He and Garfunkel. He's kind of hung in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kevin from Brookline. What do you think, Kevin?
Hello, Kevin.
Howdy, friends. Well, a long, long time ago, I used to be a very volatile young man filled with stress and anger at the world. And then I started playing in a musical group and singing, and it saved my life. I get all my angst out, and it's made me very Zen-like and led to me teaching and being very creative.
Really?
So the benefits of it, I mean, you folks have met me and know me to be a nice person. I used to teach.
Oh, Kevin. Kevin. Hi,
Yeah.
Kevin. I didn't recognize your voice first. Of course we know you. Go
Urban
ahead.
Improv, Kevin?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
my goodness.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Great.
I've been lucky enough to play with the same fellas in a group for over 20 years. And literally the first few times that I played, I got so much anger and so much stress out.
Oh.
And it evens me out. It's so therapeutic. There's nothing like it. And I'm blessed to play with those guys.
Kevin, we love hearing from you, and that was a great call. Thank you. Before we end, Anonymous says, I was in the cast of A Man of No Importance in your studio playing flute. I got into singing later in life, and I can say that the connection you feel from singing compared to instrumental playing is far deeper,
Okay.
though both are great.
All right, listen to this. I'm going to squeeze this one in really quickly. It's not just a metaphor. When we say we're in sync with others, when people sing together, their heart rates, brain waves, even breath patterns begin to
Wow.
entrain or harmonize. That's what we call entrainment, the national synchronization
great.
of biological rhythms with an external rhythm like music or voice. From a sound healing perspective, this is powerful. Wow. Boy, I think we should better have the BPR chorus or something, do you think?
Yeah,
we have
you and I can
tryouts
lead
next
it.
week?
I think that'd be really good.
Yeah, I can at least keep on key, Jim.
What do you mean at least I can keep on key?
Well.
I am not a horrible singer, by the way.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thanks to everybody who came down to see the show at the Boston Public Library.
you all. We
with or
appreciate
without
it.
RSVPing. And keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at
You know
Boston
what they
Public
use for
Radio.
their ID to get in? Their Costco card with the gold
That's
star
right.
on it. Thank you.
That's right. Maybe we should have people sing a few bars on the way in as
I
like
like
a little
that.
contest. Maybe we should have a singing contest.
Maybe we shouldn't.
Okay. Tomorrow we're back here at the Boston Public Library. National security expert Juliette Kine, Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Young, naturalist and author Cy Montgomery, and GBH's Megan Smith and Harvard's Alex Green on Massachusetts' history of mistreating disabled people. We want to thank our great crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John the Claw Parker, our executive producer Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Guy, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez Burke, and Juan Jose Cadena, plus our hosts at the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. Stay tuned to an on-tape edition. I think Jared's got a couple of days off.
Good.
But the Culture Show, nonetheless, with Jared Bowen, is going to start right after us here on 89.7 GBH. See you later, Jim.
You're supposed to say I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thank you very much
Bye,
for tuning
all.
in. Hope you can tune
See you
in tomorrow and have a great day.
Don't make me sing.